A mysterious gift is hidden in a small, delicately decorated box. The shiny decor attracts attention and arouses curiosity. The box shimmers in the light, promising something magical and valuable inside. A young man in an elegant green suit holds out the box to the girl. She accepts it with interest, watching the smile on his face and feeling the excitement of the surprise. He addresses her respectfully, calling her Baroness. The box in his hands looks especially important and meaningful. In his eyes, one can read hidden joy and pride in his choice. The girl accepts the gift with joy and surprise. Her eyes light up and she looks fondly at the box. A light blush covers her cheeks with excitement and joy. The young man invites her to open the box herself, hinting that something special is hiding inside. His confidence and mysterious smile only fuel her interest. The girl opens the box with delight and discovers a beautiful hairpin. Her joy is boundless. She's amazed by the beauty of the gift. Her heart is filled with gratitude and happiness. She begins to realize that this gift has a special meaning. The hairpin arouses deep emotions in her. The girl tremblingly holds it in her hands, feeling tears of joy come to her eyes. The baby on the red chair looks adorable. The gift perfectly complements her outfit, making her even cuter. She smiles and laughs, making everyone present smile. The mother thanks the young man for the gift, delighted to see how it fits their little princess. She does not hide her delight and happiness, her voice trembling with emotion. The young man looks on with slight concern, but agrees that the gift does indeed fit the little girl, and smiles in response to the family's joy. He feels relieved and pleased that his gesture has been so warmly received. Errol, sitting in a chair, notices two adults kneeling before her. One of them complains about his legs, which have been shaken by something. Errol finds the situation amusing as she watches them with a serious expression on her face. The little princess looks displeased. She realizes that her mission has failed and it makes her feel frustrated. Errol holds her pacifier and looks away thoughtfully. Errol picked the perfect candidate for a groom, thinking that Earl Young-sik would be a great choice. But her plans go awry. The woman in the blue dress persuades the Count to pay attention to the princess's joy at the gift. Count Young-sik, in pain, can't hold back his tears. Errol looks at him with disapproval, realizing that her efforts have failed. The shadow on his face reflects his confusion and frustration. Errol, hugging his little friend, tells him that the gift he received was actually meant for her. The girl in the blue dress is surprised and seems a little embarrassed. Amelia lifts the little princess in her arms and offers her the opportunity to fly. Errol is startled and flatly refuses the offer, believing that things are not going as they should. Errol, still holding on to her princess, decides that she has done her best. She introduces herself as Amelia, the only and very lovely princess of this country, proud of her status. Errol reflects on her actions, apologizes to the Count, and concludes that she has done the best she can. She's enjoying the moment despite all the setbacks. Outside, three people are discussing what appears to be an approaching car. They decide to step aside to avoid danger, but a woman hears strange noises and suggests they go look. Amelia sits by the river, contemplating her condition. She decides to watch something to sober up, or read a manhwa to take her mind off her problems. Amelia, looking at the screen of her phone, thinks about the web novel, Spring Coming to Dry Fields. Her heart begins to beat faster as she immerses herself in reading. Suddenly, she is overcome with emotion and cries out, trying to stop her feelings. She finds the novel so exciting and interesting that she is overcome with excitement. Amelia suddenly finds herself inside the novel and realizes that she has become a part of it. She wonders if she is dead, as everything seems all too real. Amelia now finds herself in the body of an infant. She thinks sadly that if she had known this was going to happen, she would have chosen something more interesting to read. Amelia realizes that she is in the body of a helpless baby, deprived of the ability to speak or even have teeth. She is not the main character, but just a 1-year-old baby. Reincarnated, Amelia ponders her new fate as Princess Errol, who is destined to die. She wonders why she has such a terrible fate. Errol cries in her crib, feeling the helplessness of her new condition. She thinks about how unfair her fate is. At Errol's cry comes her mother, Lucinda. She lifts the girl out of her crib and affectionately asks if she is hungry. Lucinda kisses Errol gently, showing her concern. She continues to question the girl to see if she has soiled her pants. Errol's emotions and Lucinda's concern show that despite their difficulties, there is a real bond and love between them. Errol is holding a small child in her arms, with her face expressing joy. She tries to comfort the baby by calling him Mommy. The combination of warm colors and Errol's caring gaze creates an atmosphere of comfort and security. Lucinda, Errol's mother, looks at her baby with tenderness and a little strictness at the same time. She notices that the baby has wet his pants, which confirms her hunch. Errol responds by assuring her that nothing of the sort has happened. Errol pulls back a little to fix her hair. She promises the baby that everything will be fine and asks him to wait a bit. In the background, you can see the light coming through the window, emphasizing the comfort of home. Lucinda is busy in the kitchen, cooking something delicious for her daughter. She looks content and smiles, busy with her task. Errol, watching her mother, feels protected and loved. The baby remains in the crib, watching what is happening. The light coming through the window creates a feeling of warmth and security. He waits for everything to be ready, watching his mother's every move. The dim light falls on the room, creating an atmosphere of modesty and even poverty. One can see that their living conditions are far from ideal. The little boy, sitting on the bed, reflects on his poverty. He notices that the word poverty backwards gives I. This causes him to have sad thoughts about his situation and living conditions. Errol, despite her poverty, admires the beauty of her mother Lucinda. She believes that Lucinda looks beautiful despite her hard times. Errol feels guilty that their poverty prevents her mother from arranging her personal life. Errol comes to the conclusion that they need to tell everyone about their royal ancestry. She believes that if they reveal their secret, they can move into the palace and forget about poverty forever. This thought fills her with hope and optimism. However, Errol realizes that there is a mad emperor waiting for them in the palace. This thought fills her with fear and doubt. She realizes that their situation is much more complicated than she thought, and that the paths to happiness are not always easy. In an old house at the edge of the village, Princess Errol approached the door warily when she heard a knock. She opened the door ajar, trying to see who was behind it. Standing on the threshold was James, a man with brown hair and a sly smile on his face. He cheerfully greeted Lucinda, Errol's mother, but Errol quickly slammed the door shut. Errol excitedly asked James why he had come. James insisted that it was time to accept his offer. Lucinda eyed him warily, not knowing what to say. Little Errol, who had hidden in the room, eyed James with suspicion and called him an intruding gorilla. She didn't trust the man and sensed danger. Errol tried to talk James out of it, telling him that he should cut the crap and leave. James insisted that he was the richest in the village and would be able to help them. Lucinda stood in front of Errol and with a tired look urged James to stop persisting as her patience was running out. She was on the verge of despair. Errol thought about how fed up she was with this behavior. She was angry at James, thinking that people like this were in every world and were no good. Even though she was only 1 year old, Errol was aware of her adulthood. Thoughts of magic that she might be able to use in this reality flashed through her mind. Lucinda walked up to Errol and apologized for scaring her. She hugged her, trying to comfort her and warm her with her warmth. Errol looked at Lucinda fondly and thought that she was poor and miserable. Lucinda assured her that everything would be all right, trying to hide her tears and sadness. Princess Errol is desperately trying to figure out how to help the main character, who is about to turn 21. Her concern for others and her desire to find a solution clearly shows her kindness and determination. Errol, hugging her mom Lucinda, reflects on her first steps toward helping. Her perseverance and determination are inspiring and moving. Mommy Lucinda jokingly asks if Errol has pooped, which causes embarrassment for the princess. This adds a moment of humor and shows their close and trusting relationship. Lucinda prepares dinner and informs Errol with a smile that everything will be ready soon. This scene emphasizes the warmth and comfort of their home. Errol, looking at the bowl of oatmeal, recalls a past unpleasant experience and expresses her displeasure. However, her mother is confident that she will succeed in making a delicious dish. A magical creature, Boo Boo, appears, which Errol, as a member of the royal family, can control. This magical scene adds mystery and magic to their lives. Errol explains that she is the only one who can see Boo Boo since she is still young. She orders Boo Boo to complete her task, showing her confidence and leadership skills. Errol gives Boo Boo detailed instructions on how to deal with the recent visitor, leaving some of the information censored. This adds mystery and intrigue. Boo Boo confirms that he has understood Errol's orders and prepares to complete the task. Errol feels satisfaction and confidence in her actions. Before Boo Boo sets off, Errol asks him to wait as she has another errand to run. This scene ends the story on a note of anticipation and anticipation of new events. In a small box, Errol's father's belongings are preserved. They are to be given to the Emperor to keep the memory of him and his services alive. These things symbolize the past and duty to the family, reminding them that everything in life is connected and has meaning. Errol decides to return to the palace, realizing that the time has come for this important step. The cat at her side supports her decision as if sensing the importance of the moment. Errol feels a slight excitement as she is about to undergo a big change. Errol's mother, Lucinda, is cooking in the kitchen when she hears of her daughter's intention to return. She wonders why Errol has changed her mind, but she can't stop humming her tune. Lucinda continues to do chores around the house, trying to understand her daughter's motives. Errol explains that her determination to return to the palace stems from her concern for her poor aunt, who needs help and support. She feels it is her duty to be there for her family in times of need and is willing to do anything for their well-being. Lucinda invites Errol to dinner, delighted with her decision. She makes her favorite oatmeal, knowing it will lift her daughter's spirits. Errol sees her mother's concern in every gesture, every movement, and her heart fills with warmth. Errol struggles, but still begins to eat his oatmeal. He realizes that his favorite porridge is part of the comfort of home and his mother's love. The taste of the familiar food brings her back to her childhood, reminding her of simple but important moments in their lives. Errol decides he will no longer tolerate the hated oatmeal. He realizes that it is time for a change and that he needs to make important steps in his life. This decision symbolizes his readiness for a new phase and his desire to change his destiny. Half a month has passed since the decision was made. Errol feels ready for new challenges and changes despite the doubts. She realizes that there are many difficulties ahead, but her strength and determination help her move forward. Errol thinks about the cursed cat that is always around and reminds him of household chores and responsibilities. However, he realizes that the cat is part of his life and family history, and that each element of that history has its own meaning and place. During dinner, Errol and Lucinda notice a strange noise. They wonder who it could be, and that the new day will bring them new surprises and challenges. In the noise, they hear the anticipation of changes that will not leave their lives the same. Errol, the little princess with golden hair, is worried, but Lucinda, her mom, reassures her, promising that everything will be okay and she is there for her. Errol calms down a bit, but the worry still remains on her face. A knock is heard in the house, and Errol, sitting in her chair, fearfully asks who is there. Lucinda, with a spoon in her hand, also looks alarmed, preparing for the unexpected guest. Suddenly, soldiers in blue uniforms surround the house. Lucinda and Errol watch in horror as a stranger in a black cloak and blue hair steps forward, causing even more questions and fear. The stranger states that he has come to meet his niece. Lucinda and Errol, still in shock, can't figure out who this mysterious man is or why he has come. Errol suddenly notices how deep and cool the stranger's voice is. She finds him very attractive. This moment confuses her even more and causes mixed feelings. Lucinda tries to figure out who the stranger thinks is her niece. She is clearly confused, not believing her ears and not understanding what is going on. Tesa, Errol's uncle, casts a spell that fills the room with magical light. His determination and strength is evident in his entire appearance. He is ready to protect his niece. The soldiers surround the house, and Tesa, standing at the entrance, awaits further instructions. One of the soldiers calls him Majesty, emphasizing his high status and power. Lucinda wonders if Errol is really the one Tesa is talking about. She senses that there is something more behind it all and realizes that their lives will never be the same again. Errol, a little girl with golden hair, exclaims that she is a princess. She sits in a high chair and smiles while a magical creature floats beside her. Lucinda, her mom, looks on in surprise, trying to figure out what is going on. Tesa, Errol's uncle, looks sternly at the girl and wonders what's wrong. Errol, holding the magical creature in his hands, seems surprised by his reaction and begins to worry. His cold stare confuses the little princess. Tesa remembers that Errol is a bastard child. His older brother, the late King Lloyd, was the only one who loved the girl. This memory causes Tesa to have conflicting emotions, and he looks thoughtfully at his niece. Errol hugs the magical creature tightly and tells her that this is the niece he has been searching for. Her innocence and openness make Tessa feel tender. He looks at her from a new perspective, realizing her importance. Errol apologizes to Tessa and admits his guilt. The only thing she wants is to never eat oatmeal again. Her sincere confession and tears are heartwarming to Tessa, and he thinks of ways to help her. Tessa, struck by the girl's innocence and honesty, realizes that she is truly important to him. He feels a new affection brewing in his heart for his niece. His gaze grows softer, and he smiles. Errol, slightly embarrassed, watches Tessa. She tries to understand his reaction to her words and actions. Her sincerity and innocence continue to touch his heart, causing him to feel warm and cared for. Lucinda runs into the room and abruptly interrupts the conversation, defending Errol. She demands that Tessa explain why he is looking at the girl so intently. Her maternal instinct causes her to feel strong emotions. Tessa tries to explain himself, but Lucinda won't let him get a word in edgewise. She defends her daughter with full determination. Their confrontation becomes increasingly tense until they come to an understanding. Tessa admits his guilt and promises not to scare Errol anymore. He realizes that he has to take care of her and support her like his brother did. Their relationship begins to change for the better. Errol, the little princess with golden hair, is stunned by what she has heard. Her eyes reflect fear, and her thoughts are full of anxiety that such words could make her lose her life. Nearby, the little dog jumps merrily while the bear looks on doubtfully. The situation escalates, with Errol trying to explain to Lucinda that things are not as she thinks. Lucinda, on the other hand, tries to calm her down, assuring her of her protection. The girl's panic intensifies as she realizes that this is serious. Errol, sitting in the child's chair, agonizes over the way out of the critical situation. She is concerned that her uncle Tessa is acting like a mad tyrant emperor. The girl's little hands tremble with fear. The princess tries to make excuses for Tessa, remembering his recent warm gaze. She hopes he won't get hot-headed and act impulsively. But then Tessa himself appears, cold and unyielding, his gaze piercing everything around him. He speaks of someone no longer being there, and Errol looks at him with horror. Errol panics as she realizes that if this continues, her mother Lucinda could die as early as Chapter 2. Her thoughts are chaotic, and her fear for her mom intensifies. The situation seems to be spiraling out of control. Errol decisively realizes she has to do something about it. Clenching her fists, she prepares for decisive action, determination, and courage burning in her eyes. Tessa and Lucinda suddenly appear in front of Errol. Tessa looks threatening, and Lucinda looks worried. Errol realizes that this look from Tessa could make her end up in a coffin, and the situation seems hopeless. Lucinda asks, with bewilderment and concern, what kind of papa is meant. Errol realizes his mistake, but it is too late to change anything. Errol, gathering her courage, decides to attack no matter what. She prepares for a murderous attack, realizing that she has an uphill battle ahead of her for her loved ones. Errol, a little princess with golden hair, asks to be let out of her high chair, turning to Lucinda. At this time, a magical cat with wings is nearby, mocking her helplessness. Tessa, Errol's uncle, notices her screams and points out that Lucinda can't hear her words. He explains that the cat is laughing because Lucinda is not responding to Errol's requests. Tessa tells him that Errol is asking to get her out of the high chair. Lucinda, surprised that Tessa knows her name, begins to suspect that something unusual is going on. Lucinda asks Tessa how he knew that was Errol's name. Meanwhile, Errol continues her attempts to get out of the chair, clearly frustrated by the lack of help. Errol decides to act on her own and crawls across the floor, attracting Lucinda's attention. Lucinda asks where she is going and gets a firm answer. Errol crawls to the door, determined to save his aunt. Tessa appears in the doorway, dressed in her magical outfit, and watches her actions carefully. Errol hugs Lucinda and calls Tessa daddy, despite her surprise. Lucinda says in bewilderment that he's not her daddy, but Errol insists. Tessa asks Lucinda with interest if the cat is her familiar. Lucinda, with a baby in her arms, confirms, but is still surprised by what is happening. Lucinda and Tessa continue to talk about the familiar, Tessa looking at the cat with attention and bewilderment. They are trying to figure out what is going on and how the cat is related to Errol. Suddenly, the white fox appears and tells Tessa that he summoned him. This unexpected appearance adds to the intrigue and makes everyone wonder about new mysteries and magical adventures. A man with blue hair standing next to a white fox with many tails introduces him as his familiar named Langris. He looks confident and mysterious with his hand on the back of his magical companion. Tessa looks at his interlocutor, saying that he has irrefutable proof that he and Errol are of the same blood. His determination and calmness give his words a special power, emphasizing the importance of the moment. Lucinda, holding Errol in her arms, is shocked, but her eyes are full of understanding and concern. She begins to realize that Tessa is an important figure in her daughter's life, and this knowledge causes her to feel deeply. Errol happily shouts, "Daddy," but Tessa corrects her, telling her that he is her uncle, not her father. Errol repeats, "Daddy," to which Tessa smiles softly, realizing that the little girl doesn't fully understand the situation yet. Tessa explains to Errol that he is not her father, but her father's younger brother. Little Errol looks at him wide-eyed and says she understands. Her eyes read trust and genuine curiosity. Lucinda anxiously asks Tessu if he is Errol's uncle, what happened to her father. Her face expresses a mixture of hope and fear, waiting for the answer that could change their entire lives. Tessa tells her with sadness in his eyes that his brother regretted to the very end that he never got to see his child. His words are filled with sadness and a sense of loss, making this moment especially touching. Lucinda realizes that Errol will never be able to see his father. Her face expresses pain and compassion for her daughter who will grow up without her father's love, but she knows that Tessa will be there for her. Tessa extends his hand to Lucinda and Errol, inviting them to come with him. His kindness and determination inspire hope that they can start a new chapter of their lives together, despite the challenges. Errol happily agrees, saying goodbye to childhood memories and hugging Tessu. Lucinda looks at them with gratitude, realizing that they have a new life ahead of them, full of hope and love. Lucinda holds Errol in her arms and anxiously tells her that children at this age are very sensitive to changes in their environment. Errol asks in surprise if this is about him, and a worried Tessa can be seen in the background. Lucinda suddenly remembers Lucinda thinking that she should have been brought along. At this time, Tessa calls for Errol, and the baby starts calling for her mom, repeating the word with increasing panic. Tessa tells Lucinda that he heard about what happened to her family and wonders if she's been raising the baby alone all this time. Lucinda replies that Errol is her only family. Lucinda cradles Errol, and Tessa notices that the air has gotten heavier, which adds anxiety to their conversation. Tessa says that his family has also experienced hardship, hinting at the connection of their fates. Lucinda and Errol meet Tessa, and she greets him with the utmost respect, calling him Your Majesty. At this point, the tension in the air visibly increases. Tessa gently indicates to Lucinda that she should respond, and she embarrassingly introduces herself and Errol, showing how confused she is in the presence of an important guest. Tessa walks resolutely out of the house, leaving Lucinda and Errol in the dark about what to do next. Errol tries to stop him by shouting after him, but Tessa doesn't turn around. Errol anxiously asks what will happen to him, and Lucinda holds him tighter, trying to reassure him. This emphasizes her concern and motherly love. Outside, preparations begin, and people are busily handing out flyers. One of the men exclaims that it is true, causing a wave of discussion and emotion among those gathered. The atmosphere becomes increasingly tense. People begin to actively spread the news, and curiosity and anxiety grow, reflecting the seriousness of the situation. Errol, a young princess, is walking in the palace garden when suddenly sheets of paper start falling on her. She looks around in surprise, noticing that everyone around her is also confused. There are questions going around as to whether the princess can summon a familiar as well. Meanwhile, in another part of the palace, a young man is discussing with an elderly mentor that among all the pretenders to the throne, only Tessa has the ability to summon a surname. He ponders why exactly she has been given such power. Elsewhere in the palace, a man of oriental appearance, sitting in his luxurious room, confidently declares that Tessa, as a blood relative of the Illuminous family, can certainly control a familiar. He is clearly proud of his knowledge of the family. Discussions continue in the royal council. The counselors discuss the fate of Princess Errol. They speculate that, as a princess, she will probably marry and leave the palace if the emperor marries and has a child. Meanwhile, Errol and her mom, Lucinda, arrive at the new Panoxis palace. It is explained to them that this is their new home where they will live. The girl looks around curiously, amazed by the grandeur of the building. Errol is thrilled to realize that she is now rich. She glows with happiness, realizing that her life has changed forever. Her big green eyes glow with joy, and she is ready for new adventures. On the doorstep of their new home, they are greeted by Fenril, the new maid. She greets Errol and Lucinda and promises to serve them. Errol is a little confused, but she is curious to learn more about the new person in their lives. Lucinda asks Fenril to take care of them, and the maid readily agrees. They enter the great hall together, where other servants are already lined up, ready to perform their duties. The atmosphere is filled with anticipation and excitement. Fenril shows Errol and Lucinda to their rooms. She assures them that the princess will feel right at home here. Errol looks at the spacious room with interest, already imagining how she will settle into her new place. Fenril opens the door and says that this is her highness room. Errol, holding her mother's hand, steps inside. Everything in the room is arranged for her comfort. The girl realizes that this new home will be her new beginning, full of mystery and magic. Errol, a little princess with golden hair, lives in luxurious chambers. The room is decorated in pastel colors with exquisite decorations. Lucinda, Errol's mother, cares for her daughter and discusses with Fenril, a servant, the arrangement of the room, pointing out details that need to be added for coziness. Fenril tells Lucinda that His Majesty has ordered perfect conditions, but there is still much work to be done. Lucinda holds Errol in her arms and listens intently, agreeing that refinements are needed to make the room perfect for her daughter. Lucinda asks Fenril to report any problems or inconveniences that may arise. Fenril assures her that everything will be done in the best way possible and that they will be able to handle any situation that needs attention. Errol looks at Fenril with curiosity, wondering if she has been talking to her all this time. The little princess ponders if Fenril is all right, as she seemed a bit strange. Errol's mom smiles and asks her daughter if she wants to play. Errol, a little embarrassed, answers in the negative. Her mother realizes that Errol is not yet used to her new surroundings and tries to be supportive. Lucinda is surprised to realize that her husband was the emperor. Errol, crawling on the floor, tries to get used to her new room, which seems too big and unfamiliar to her. Errol and Lucinda see a blue cat with wings floating in the air. The cat apparently belongs to their family too, and Errol orders it to come down to the ground. Errol looks out the window, enjoying the view and feeling safe. The cat flies nearby, creating a magical atmosphere around them. They realize that now their lives will change for the better. Lucinda tells Errol that now they won't have to suffer anymore. She is sure that their new life will bring them only joy and peace, and they will be able to enjoy every day in this beautiful place. The cat offers Errol to eat her favorite oatmeal, assuring her that they will find everything they need in their new home. Errol, not understanding what the cat means, wonders where her favorite porridge is hidden. A little girl with golden hair named Errol looks surprisingly cute as she sits among the bright colors and smiles. Her green eyes shine, and her ruddy cheeks give her even more charm. Lucinda admires her beauty and the cute bow on her dress, emphasizing how adorable she is. Lucinda, holding Errol in her arms, can't take her eyes off her pretty bow. She marvels at its beauty, which causes the girl to question whether she is really cute. Errol eagerly awaits confirmation of her charm. Fenril remarks reproachfully that Lucinda might tear the bow if she continues to admire it so much. Lucinda, startled, carefully loosens her grip so as not to damage the delicate fabric, but her attention continues to remain on little Errol. Errol looks suspiciously at Fenril, holding the little dragonkin on his head, who clearly shares her opinion of the woman's behavior. He remarks that he doesn't like the way Fenril is talking. Errol thinks about how Lucinda is just a minor character. Fenril informs him that the princess has already been assigned the best nannies and teachers. Errol and Lucinda listen carefully to her words. Fenril continues to explain that Lucinda's help is no longer needed, as other people will now take care of the princess. Lucinda, somewhat stunned, stands in front of Fenril and listens to her words. She thinks about her daughter's future and how soon her schooling will begin. Inwardly, she is concerned about the upcoming changes in Errol's life. Fenrir assures Lucinda that she will be decently compensated once the princess gets used to her new surroundings. She insists that Lucinda leave Errol and go. Lucinda asks when training will begin, but gets a rather cold answer. Fenrir clarifies that Errol should now be called a princess, and training will begin as soon as she receives the title. Lucinda realizes that her daughter will now hold an important title and that there are many challenges and new responsibilities ahead of her. Amelia, a little girl with golden hair, sits on the bed and looks at her Aunt Lucinda with interest, waiting for her answer. Lucinda smiles thoughtfully and encourages Amelia to consider her actions. The little girl is clearly anxious, trying to figure out what her aunt said. Meanwhile, Boo Boo, a familiar with wings, is watching carefully. He notices that Lucinda's mood has changed drastically, and he wonders with slight bewilderment what could have affected her mood so much. Amelia and Lucinda are sitting on the grass, both looking a little depressed. Boo Boo hovers in the air next to them and anxiously wonders what happened to them, trying to understand the reasons for their sadness. Lucinda looks at little Amelia and reassuringly tells her that she is lucky, as she has nothing to worry about. Boo Boo, however, flies up resentfully and asks who she called Kitty, for he too is an important part of their company. Amelia takes her first steps, holding on to Aunt Lucinda's hands. The little girl joyfully exclaims, "Mommy," and Lucinda admiringly watches her progress, encouraging her and cheering her on with each new step. Lucinda looks at Amelia with a smile, noticing how much she has grown. She feels proud of her niece and at the same time a slight sadness at how quickly time flies. Amelia and Lucinda sit on the grass again, still looking depressed. Boo Boo, watching them, is puzzled as to what could have affected their moods so much, not understanding the human experience. In the background, the maids pass by, talking amongst themselves. One of them wonders what Mrs. Fenrir is thinking, alluding to Lucinda, who seems pensive and worried. The maids continue to discuss the situation, noting that Lucinda always follows Mrs. Ricardo and has now become attached to the princess. They worry about Amelia's future if she is suddenly kicked out of the castle. Lucinda, hearing the maids talking, becomes even more pensive. She knows that the princess's aunt is also here, which adds to her worries about Amelia's future and their fate. Amelia overhears someone call her a commoner who can't read. It hurt her, but she decided not to show her feelings. She remembered how she had once walked into the palace and froze with her mouth open in front of the entrance, stunned by its grandeur. Errol, Amelia's aunt, calls out to her and suggests that she go for a walk. Amelia happily agrees and calls her mom, excited to spend time outdoors. They enjoy the greenery and nature around them. Lucinda, holding Amelia in her arms, asks if she is okay. Amelia looks up at her aunt with big eyes, feeling safe and cozy. Their tender moment is interrupted by Fenrir's stern voice. Fenrir demands an explanation of where they went. Her face expresses sternness and displeasure. Lucinda tries to justify herself, but her words sound unsure. Amelia senses the tension in the air. Lucinda, holding Amelia in her arms, quickly makes an excuse, saying they just went for a walk. Fenrir reminds her that the princess must be accompanied by at least 5 servants while walking. Lucinda apologizes, realizing her mistake. Fenrir blames Lucinda, claiming it was entirely her fault. Lucinda, feeling guilty, tries to justify herself, but Fenrir does not accept her explanation. Amelia senses the tension between the adults, but doesn't understand why they are arguing. Fenrir tells Lucinda to take Amelia away and give her a warm bath to calm down. Lucinda obediently nods, holding Amelia in her arms. Amelia looks at Fenrir with curiosity and slight bewilderment. Fenrir decisively declares that Amelia can sleep alone now and asks Lucinda to leave her alone. Lucinda protests, saying that Amelia is too young for that. Fenrir is relentless, insisting on her own. Amelia, sensing that something is wrong, tries to protest, but her protests go unheard. Fenrir claims that Lucinda knows nothing about parenting and her opinion doesn't matter. Amelia feels insecure and scared. Fenrir eventually relents, but warns that it will only be once. Lucinda promises to be more careful next time. Amelia, tired of everything, falls asleep peacefully in her aunt's arms, feeling her warmth and care. Little Princess Amelia tearfully realizes that she has overlooked something important. She feels confused and sad, clasping her hands to her chest, her eyes filling with tears. Her heart clenches with incomprehension and pain. Lucinda stands in the empty hall of the palace and ponders that Amelia would be much better off outside this luxurious but cold and lonely place. She feels the weight of responsibility for her niece's well-being and gazes wistfully into the distance. Lucinda, magically hearing Boo-Boo's voice, wonders in bewilderment what is going on. She looks around, trying to understand the source of the strange words coming to her. Her gaze is full of alarm and surprise. Amelia is outraged when she hears the strange words from Lucinda. She asks sharply when she has ever said such a thing. Her face expresses outrage and indignation. She can't understand what is going on or why her aunt would say such a thing. Lucinda tries to calm Amelia down, assuring her that everything will be fine and that she can go away and live happily ever after. However, Amelia cannot believe these words, her eyes full of disbelief and anxiety about the future. Amelia asks Lucinda why she says that. She doesn't understand how her aunt can leave her in this place. Her voice is shaking. Tears are in her eyes. She doesn't want to be alone. Lucinda tries to explain that it's all for Amelia's happiness. She wants her niece to be happy, even if she has to leave herself. Lucinda is determined, her words sounding confident. Amelia, hearing this, begins to think that her aunt is ashamed of her. She asks Lucinda if this is true. Her voice is full of fear and pain. She is afraid of losing her aunt's love and support. Lucinda tries to convince Amelia that it isn't true. She explains that it's not all about her, but for her own good. Lucinda wants Amelia to realize that she is important and loved, and that her happiness will always come first. Amelia cries in Lucinda's arms, repeating that she wanted to make her happy. Her heart breaks with pain. She feels helpless and alone. Lucinda hugs her, trying to comfort her and reassure her that everything will be okay. Amelia, a little princess with golden hair, kneels beside the luxurious bed, surrounded by soft pink curtains. She desperately apologizes to Lucinda, crying out "Uvada" in despair. Errol, a small boy with a pale face, lies on the bed with a wet towel on his forehead, clearly sick. He weakly asks what is going on, his eyes half closed. Teysa, a man with blue hair, stands in front of the two maids, who bow their heads in apology. They acknowledge their guilt for what happened, while Teysa looks flustered. Errol is still in bed, his forehead touched by Tessa's hand. Tessa softly says the boy's name, trying to reassure him and make sure he's going to be okay. Errol, still with a pale face, weakly holds Tessa's hand and whispers that he wants to go home. He looks exhausted, his eyes full of tears that are about to roll down his cheeks. Teysa sits on the bed, visibly agitated and sad. He orders the familiar to appear to help make sense of the situation and figure out what to do next. The familiar, a cute cat with wings named Boo-Boo, appears next to Earl's bed. He expresses his displeasure at always being yanked around, but is willing to listen to Tessa's orders. Tessa, looking very serious, demands an explanation from the familiar. His eyes are full of determination, and a dark aura swirls around him, emphasizing his anger. Boo-Boo gives a disgruntled look as he explains the situation, feeling like he has to explain everything all the time. He is tense, but willing to help with the problem. Teysa looks at someone outside the frame, pleading for Earl to be spared. His face reflects desperation and pleading for help, while the background remains hazy and uncertain. Fenrir is trying to make Princess Amelia the perfect heiress to stop the rumors that she is not a real princess. She hopes that strict measures will silence any detractors spreading these rumors. She admits that her greed has overshadowed little Amelia's feelings. Teysa agrees that her words make sense, realizing that Fenrir acted in the girl's best interest, but was oblivious to her emotions. Teysa decides to speed up the process so that Amelia can become a princess as soon as possible. He realizes that this will require the help of Warlord Raffaello, and he intends to act immediately to remove all obstacles. The meeting with Raffaello begins with his words about his upcoming visit. Tessa expresses his respect and asks Raffaello for help, knowing that he has the necessary resources and influence to accomplish this task. Tessa confesses to Raffaello the need for his help and mentions his involvement in his brother's death. He hopes that Raffaello will understand the gravity of the situation and agree to support him in this endeavor. Raffaello welcomes Amelia and tells her that her task is to become a true princess. He gives her confidence, reaffirming her status and the importance of her role in the kingdom. Amelia greets Raffaello, and he tells her that her task is to become a true princess. Those present begin to treat Amelia with respect and admiration, seeing her inner strength and dignity. Lucinda is surprised by the changes in the behavior of those around her and wonders about the reasons for this sudden change. She begins to suspect that there are some ulterior motives and intrigue involved. Fenriel returns to Amelia and tells her of the new plan. She decides to support the girl and help her to become stronger so that she can face all difficulties and ill-wishers. Amelia realizes that her support from Tessa and Raffaello will help her overcome all obstacles. She decides to accept her role and become a real princess, worthy of the respect and love of everyone around her. Amelia, standing in her snow-white dress, has just received the news that she is now officially a princess. She looks at her new shoes, feeling mixed emotions, pride and anxiety about the future. Warlord Raffaello appears on the stage in his dress uniform. His stern but satisfied look makes it clear that he has a hand in elevating Amelia to her new status. There is tension in the air, for there is something more behind that smile. Lucinda holds little Errol in her arms, wary of Raffaello's approach. Amelia is terrified and confused, trying to figure out who this man is and why he is here. Errol, unsuspecting, reaches for him. Raffaello, softened by Errol's childlike innocence, smiles and assures Lucinda of his friendliness. Lucinda, though hesitantly, begins to believe in his good intentions. She feels the unknowing tension ease slightly. Amelia watches in relief as Raffaello continues to chat with Errol. He says that she called him Grandpa, which brings a slight smile to everyone's faces. Amelia begins to feel that maybe Raffaello isn't so bad after all. Lucinda, confident that Raffaello is sincere, tells her that taking care of Errol is a natural thing for him. Amelia realizes that Raffaello can be an important ally, despite his stern appearance and high position. Raffaello compliments Amelia, noting her kindness and modesty. She smiles, realizing that her new role is recognized and supported. Lucinda and Errol smile as well, feeling that everything is going according to plan. Amelia notices that Errol is hungry and Lucinda laughs, confirming it. Raffaello says that Amelia now has a tremendous amount of power in her hands, and she must decide how to use it. Amelia feels responsible for her family's future. Errol looks at Amelia with innocent eyes, and her first wish is to be with her mom. Amelia smiles, feeling that her role as a princess hasn't changed her love for her family. Lucinda, holding Errol, realizes that Amelia will always take care of them. Raffaello realizes that the bond between them is strong. Lucinda, looking at Amelia and Errol, realizes that their future promises to be bright and full of new possibilities. Amelia feels confident and strong, ready for any challenge on her new path. Little Errol, seeing that her Aunt Lucinda was in danger, immediately realized that action had to be taken. She asked what the intruder was going to do to her aunt, but all she heard in response was evil laughter. Raffaello, a man with white hair, proved to be a cunning and dangerous foe. Raffaello, enjoying his victory, laughed and noted that the old man had almost fooled him. He continued to threaten, showing his serpentine nature. Errol realized that she needed to quickly come up with a plan to save her aunt and herself. Errol decided that she needed to act quickly despite her fear. She realized that she needed to fix the situation at all costs. The fires of determination lit up in her eyes, and she prepared herself for action. Errol made the decision to improvise. She hugged Raffaello, calling him Daddy, in an attempt to throw him off balance. This bold action was unexpected and surprised everyone present. Lucinda, seeing this, could not believe her eyes. Lucinda asked in confusion what was going on, and Raffaello began to wonder how he felt. He was puzzled and didn't know how to react to Errol's sudden embrace. It gave them precious seconds. Lucinda noted that Errol was usually a calm child and was surprised by her determination. She realized that Errol was trying to save them. Raffaello began to question his actions, sensing something strange. Raffaello realized that he needed to be careful. Lucinda noted that Errol seemed to like the warlord. Raffaello couldn't figure out what was going on, but he sensed that the situation was getting out of control. Lucinda remarked that Raffaello really liked Errol, and now he would miss her. It was an unexpected development. Errol continued to hug Raffaello, trying to divert his attention and buy time. Raffaello realized that he now had to pay special attention to safety. He made the decision to be careful and attentive to Errol's actions. He realized that the little girl was not as simple as she seemed. Raffaello introduced his family, revealing his oldest son, Alexander. He noted that Alexander had followed in his footsteps and had joined the royal guard. Lucinda and Errol were relieved, knowing that they now had protection. The blue-haired guard, Alexander, solemnly announces that he will now be in charge of Princess Amelia's safety. His determination and seriousness is evident in every movement and word. Alexander expresses his hope for the princess's support. His charm and confidence make her believe in his ability to protect her from any danger. Errol, the little princess with golden hair, is in the arms of her Aunt Lucinda. She looks admiringly at Alexander, calling him handsome. In a large hall under a magnificent chandelier, an important matter is being discussed. Lucinda asks the noble council to vote in favor of appointing Errol as princess, realizing the importance of this decision for the future of the kingdom. One of the counselors, wise and loyal, recognizes the difficulty of the task. Even for him, he is willing to work hard for the fulfillment of this request, despite the difficulties. A man with green eyes expresses his request to His Majesty. He hopes for a reciprocal favor in return for his offer, which arouses the interest of all present. The king asks with a sly smile if he is willing to fulfill the request in exchange for the fulfillment of his own. The intrigue builds, each move being discussed with the utmost care. Errol, lying in her bed, calls her uncle a scoundrel with a stern expression. Her anger and determination to expose his plan is evident even in her small features. Errol recalls how in the original story her uncle Thesa exposed the king's plans. She realizes how important it is to watch every step to prevent tragedy. Alexander, holding Errol in his arms, asks if she is looking for her aunt. His soft and caring tone reassures her, instilling confidence and a sense of security. Princess Errol looks at Thesa with curiosity. Tessa, noticing this, offers to tell her an interesting story to dispel her boredom. Errol agrees with interest, and Tessa begins her story. Tessa tells of a terrible monster that lived a long time ago. This monster was truly horrible, but his story was not boring. Errol listens, holding her breath, and imagines all the monsters she has ever heard of. Tessa continues her story, explaining that this monster was especially boring. He didn't do any harm, but just wandered around the castle, not knowing what to do. Errol chuckles, imagining such a monster. Errol thinks it would be nice if someone took care of the monster and helped him find something to do. Tessa supports the idea and says that he should take care of the ones who tortured Lucinda, the princess ward. At this time, Tessa notices Alexander outside the window. He tells Errol that the emperor is walking freely around the palace. Errol wonders how this is possible. Errol looks at Alexander through the window and realizes that he is here in their palace. She did not expect to see him at this time and place. Her surprise brings a smile to Tessa's face. Alexander, meanwhile, is minding his own business outside. He seems to be focused on something important and doesn't notice that he is being watched from the window. Errol wonders what he is so busy doing. Tessa notices that Errol is interested in what Alexander is doing. He offers to go take a closer look and see what he is doing. Errol happily agrees. Before leaving, Tessa decides to help Errol get ready for the walk. He calls the maids to take care of her outfit. Errol feels like a real princess and gets ready to go out. Errol thinks about Alexander looking suspicious, but now she realizes that he is busy with important matters. Her excitement is replaced by curiosity, and she looks forward to meeting him. A man with blue hair and a white shirt sits surrounded by bright lights. His face looks peaceful and his posture relaxed. An inner monologue describes him as an angel, emphasizing his beauty and grace. On the other hand, a man with blue hair holds a little girl with golden hair in his arms. She is worried that the man they found is sleeping. She asks not to wake him as she wants to admire his face some more. A woman with golden hair and a pink dress appears. She looks amazed and happy to see the man with blue hair. You can tell by her joyful expression and shining eyes. The man with blue hair continues to hold the girl, wondering why they look so wonderful together. He calls the girl a princess, and the girl answers him with sounds. The girl begins to cry, saying that a man and a woman can't be together. The man with blue hair doesn't understand why she is so upset and asks her what happened. The girl calms down and decides that if the situation doesn't change, she will have to intervene. Her determined face expresses her willingness to take action to remedy the situation. The scene shifts to the open air where all the characters are sitting at a table under an umbrella. The man with blue hair decides that he will do his best to separate the two. Suddenly, the girl with golden hair becomes sad and says that she has become uncomfortable. The man with blue hair notices her condition and wonders what happened. The man with blue hair concludes that she is uncomfortable being around him. He tries to figure out what the cause of her discomfort is and what can be done to make her feel better. The man with blue hair asks the girl if she is uncomfortable sitting with him. The girl looks at him, her eyes full of bewilderment and slight concern. Tessa admits with a slight chuckle that it can't be helped. His calmness contrasts with the bustle around him. Alexander has to take charge of the situation and demand Errol to himself. He is confident in his actions, despite the possible consequences. Alexander decisively takes little Errol in his arms. She is clearly not ready for this turn of events, her eyes filling with fear and incomprehension. Alexander tries to be gentle, but his determination frightens the girl. Tessa tries to calm Errol down by sitting her on her lap. However, the little girl continues to protest, feeling uncomfortable and tense. Tessa understands her feelings, but doesn't know how best to comfort the girl. At this point, Lucinda intervenes, trying to calm the situation. She asks Tessa if he likes it, to which he replies that the most important thing is care and love. Errol, hearing this, calms down a bit, but still feels uncomfortable. Lucinda continues to talk to Tessa, apologizing for her actions. She admits that she is having a hard time unlearning old habits and names. Tessa assures her that she understands and supports her. These words comfort Lucinda a little. Tessa notices Errol sitting on his lap. He notices that she is uncomfortable and stuffy. This causes him concern, and he tries to think of ways to make her feel better. Lucinda asks Alexander a question about whether they always call the princess that. Alexander replies that it is a familiar address and explains that it has become natural for Errol. Lucinda ponders his words. Alexander apologizes to Lucinda, acknowledging that it is hard for her to break out of her old habits. He doesn't blame her, realizing that she is like a mother to Errol. This brings a smile to Lucinda's face and a sense of relief. Alexander says the most important thing is the love Lucinda gives to Errol. He is sure that this is the most important thing for a girl. His words touch Lucinda, and she begins to see the situation differently. Tessa is relieved to notice that Alexander has allowed her to call Errol by her familiar name. This becomes an unexpected but welcome moment for everyone. Lucinda smiles, realizing that now one cannot be afraid to show their feelings for the girl. Princess Errol, the little girl with golden hair, thinks about how special Alexander, their new guard, might be. His looks and personality have already caught her attention. She can't figure out what's so special about him, but something draws her in. The more Lucinda looks at Alexander, the more she likes him. Alexander, the knight guarding the princess, assures her that if there is a problem, he should be told right away. He looks handsome, he has a great personality, and he can express himself well. Lucinda, still enraptured, remembers that they kept looking for Errol all this time. She begins to suspect Tessa's true intentions. Is he really using Errol for his own purposes? This question torments her and keeps her in suspense. Tessa also suspected that Lucinda was just using Errol for her own purposes. This has caused him to scrutinize her actions and motives. He wants to understand what drives her actions and what she is really planning. During a family gathering, Errol protests Tessa's strict behavior. She calls him a bad dad, trying to express her feelings and defend herself. This causes confusion and resentment in Tessa, but he tries to remain calm. Errol reiterates her opinion by yelling, "Daddy bad," and expresses her displeasure at the situation she's been put in. She doesn't understand why her daddy is the one acting so harshly and unfairly. Lucinda is surprised, but continues to support Errol by calling her daddy Daddy Pooey. This causes the girl to feel supported and protected. Lucinda tries to be on her side and not leave her alone in difficult moments. Errol decides to find a mate for Tessa and Lucinda, believing it will help improve their relationship. Her determination and desire to help makes her stronger. She believes they can become a real family if they support each other. Tessa admits that Lucinda's parenting methods seem right to him. He decides to support her and agree with her approach to raising Errol. This moment becomes an important step toward their family harmony and understanding. Tessa asks Lucinda to take care of his niece, Errol. It is a touching moment that strengthens their family bond and trust in each other. They realize that together, they can overcome any difficulties and become a true family. Sika, a young boy with brown hair, lived in a gloomy old castle. At night, he often reflected on his past while looking out the window at the starry sky. His only wish was to become stronger, to change his fate. He remembered his mother, Miss Ricardo, who was the past emperor's mistress and Lloyd's etiquette teacher. She had always set high goals for him, but she herself often remained in the shadows, suffering from unfulfilled hopes. Miss Ricardo always said that if she had a little more time, she could seduce Lloyd. This desire became her obsession, and she passed this dream on to her son so that he could achieve more. Sika, despite his youth, felt a great responsibility to fulfill his mother's wishes. He often blamed himself for her failures, believing that his existence only hindered her success. Every day, Sika struggled with his inner demons. He felt like the whole world was against him, and the only way out was to become stronger. Sometimes he even thought about committing suicide, seeing no other way out of this dark reality. Sika didn't know who his father was, which added even more uncertainty to his life. This lack of a parental figure made him even more vulnerable to external hardships and inner turmoil. He felt completely alone in the world, without anyone to give him love and support. This eternal lack of warmth made his heart even more closed and cold. One day, while sitting in a green clearing, Sika heard a child's voice. A little girl with golden hair and huge green eyes appeared in front of him. She looked at him with surprise and called him baby. This girl, Errol, the princess, came to him with a tenderness and love that he was sorely lacking. Her arrival was a ray of light in his dark life, giving him hope for a better future. Errol hugged Sika and told him that he was not alone. Her words penetrated deep into his heart, giving him the strength to fight on. Sika now had a friend who believed in him, and that changed everything in his life. Little Princess Errol, remembering that she promised to introduce her aunt to the handsome boy, is determined to fulfill her promise. Her eyes sparkle with determination, and she is full of enthusiasm. A week has passed and nothing has happened. Errol sits by the window and sits sadly, reflecting on the fact that her plans never moved forward. Her expectations have not been met, and she feels disappointed. Fenrir, a stern servant, rebukes Errol for her inappropriate behavior, reminding her of the importance of good manners. Errol, despite her young age, listens grudgingly to her rebuke, believing that she has allowed a little mischief. Fenrir begins reading a book on manners to Errol, telling an old tale of a prince and princess. Errol, as she listens to the story, begins to wonder why everything in their world is always about princes and princesses. Errol gradually falls asleep to the monotonous voice of Fenrir. The servant notices this and decides that there are enough lessons for today. It's time to let the princess rest while continuing her lessons. Suddenly, Errol is lifted into her arms and she looks at her guard Alexander with surprise. He asks with a smile how she got to this place on her own, amazed at her resourcefulness. Errol happily tells Alexander that he is the #1 husband candidate for her aunt. Alexander smiles, flattered by her words, and thanks her for her attention. Fenrir and Alexander decide to take a little walk, discussing that there are no perfect people, but it's still nice to spend time together. They agree that a walk in the fresh air would be beneficial. During the walk, they come to a huge castle. Alexander points it out, telling Errol that this place is worthy of a real princess's attention. Errol looks at the castle with admiration and anticipates new adventures. Fenrir decides that there are enough events for today. Errol, Alexander, and Fenrir return, continuing to share their experiences and plans for the future. Errol, a little princess with golden hair, sits next to the guard Alexander, who tells her about 2 castles, one emerald-colored, where His Majesty lives, and the other purple, belonging to the Empress. Errol listens with curiosity. Errol exclaims in surprise when he learns that Thesa lives in the large palace. The sight of the magnificent castle makes her think of the grandeur and beauty of life at court. Errol, marveling at the grandeur of the castle, shares her thoughts with Alexander, thinking that Tessa lives in the largest palace. Her childlike naivety and sincerity touches the guard's heart. When Errol begins to fall asleep on Alexander's lap, he asks her worriedly what has happened to her. Errol mumbles something unintelligible, alluding to her condition. Alexander wonders if Errol, the princess, is so tired. Her condition makes him worry and want to help. Errol pulls out a piece of chocolate with a twinkle in her eye and shares her joy with Alexander. She marvels at the flavor and is willing to eat hundreds of servings of oatmeal for it. Alexander smiles, reminding Errol that she is too young for such food. He tries to convince her of this, but her delight in chocolate is too great. Errol glares menacingly at Alexander, warning him of possible bloodshed if he takes the chocolate away from her. Her determination and seriousness makes him laugh. Alexander decides to keep this little secret between them, promising not to tell Fenrir about it. Errol happily accepts the chocolate, savoring the moment. Boo Boo, a cat with wings, appears next to them, interested in what is happening. His surprised look adds to the atmosphere of fabulousness and fun around the little princess and her guard. Errol, the golden-haired princess, is watching her winged cat Boo Boo, who seems to have found something new and curious. She is interested and slightly concerned at his reaction. Errol yells at Boo Boo, demanding that he come down immediately. Boo Boo excuses himself that it was just a joke and tries to run away from Errol, who chases him through the clearing. Boo Boo, still running away, reminds Errol that he is in this palace solely for the food and moved here for it. Errol, falling to the grass, is upset by his antics. Errol feels abandoned and alone. She ponders how things have turned out and that she will now have to seek help from another entity named Tessa. Errol crawls through the grass, deciding that she needs Tessa's help. She is determined to get to the Emerald Palace and find support there. At that moment, a boy with brown hair, Sika, appears. Errol is surprised by his appearance, and especially by the color of his eyes, which she has never seen before. Sika, seeing Errol, calls her baby, which makes her resent him. They get into a small argument about which one of them is really a baby. Errol continues to admire Sika's unusual eye color, expressing her surprise and admiration, which further confuses the boy. Sika admits that he is not a child, but Errol continues to call him a baby, which makes him resentful and has mixed feelings. Sika recognizes the complexity of the situation, and Errol notes that she has learned another lesson in life, adding to her knowledge and experience. The boy with brown hair, Sika, asks in bewilderment what is wanted of him and why he has to go anywhere. He looks confused and slightly annoyed, his eyes wide with surprise. Sika's gaze falls on the chocolate, and he wonders with delight if it really is chocolate. His eyes shine, and he looks mesmerized, as if he has something incredibly precious in front of him. The girl with the golden hair, Errol, holds out the chocolate and tells Sika to eat and get better quickly, giving him the most precious thing. She looks determined, and her words are full of care and warmth. Sika sits with his head down and asks Errol not to call him baby. He looks sad and embarrassed, his shoulders slumped and his gaze downward, as if he doesn't want to be seen. Sika asks Errol to call him Sika. He looks forward confidently, his gaze full of determination, and his surroundings glow with gentle colors, creating an atmosphere of calm and confidence. Errol laughs as she says poo-poo and eventually agrees to call him baby. She giggles merrily, her face lighting up with a smile, and there is an air of fun and ease around her. Errol notices the figure of a woman in the distance and exclaims joyfully that it is her aunt. She runs towards her, full of hope and joy, her movements quick and energetic, and her gaze fixed on her. Sika realizes this is dangerous and tries to stop Errol. He is worried for her safety, his face expressing alarm, and his body tense with the effort to prevent possible danger. Warlord Raffaello ponders that Alexander should handle this by refusing the promotion to captain. His gaze is serious and focused, and his thoughts are full of determination and responsibility. Raffaello wishes he had known about Princess Amelia's arrival, or he would have kicked them out immediately. He sees Amelia as the biggest problem. His face expresses tension and discontent, and his thoughts are full of worry. Raffaello realizes that his rash words could lead to serious consequences and decides to be more careful in what he says. He realizes that this is an important moment that requires a careful approach. At this point, his daughter with blue hair enters the room and expresses concern, saying that she overheard the conversation. She wants to understand what happened and what caused her father such concern. She wonders if the decision was made too hastily and how it might affect their situation. She tries to work out whether it will be beneficial or bring additional hassle. Raffaello ponders the possible consequences and admits that they don't know how it will affect their lives or if it will be beneficial. His face expresses deep concern. His daughter continues to discuss the possible consequences, saying that having a child with the emperor could make a difference. Raffaello tries to reassure her, but the anxiety is still evident on his face. She notices his smile and asks why he has that look on his face. Raffaello explains that even his eyes are smiling despite his inner anxiety. He tries to reassure his daughter that everything will be okay. Raffaello explains that it's not about benefits or problems, but that this decision will still benefit everyone. His confidence begins to calm his daughter down a bit, and she begins to see the positives. Leon, Raffaello's wife, enters the room with their young son in her arms. Raffaello is overjoyed at their arrival and marvels at how fast his son is growing up. He feels proud of his family. Raffaello marvels at how Leon has taught their son to say hello, and it touches him to the core. He rejoices in how quickly the child is growing and how carefully they are raising him. Raffaello thinks about Leon's future, hoping that he will grow up strong and will be able to overcome all the difficulties that will come his way. He is sure that Leon is an unusual child and a great future awaits him. Alexander faces an insoluble task and comes to the conclusion that he is finished. He falls into panic and despair as he realizes that he has failed to complete an important assignment that has been entrusted to him. Alexander repents of his mistakes, feeling guilty for failing to protect the princess. He feels he must be punished for his blunders and is willing to give his life for it. Princess Errol calms Alexander down, assuring him that it wasn't his fault. She begs him not to go to his death because of Boo-Boo, who she believes is responsible for the misunderstanding. Errol holds Alexander's hand, and her words begin to have an effect on him. She begs him not to leave her, assuring him that together they can overcome everything. Alexander continues to worry, but Errol does not give up and asks Booba to come out to discuss the situation. She is convinced that everything can be fixed if they work together. Boo-Boo comes out and Errol demands an explanation from him. She is determined and will not back down until she hears the truth. Alexander realizes that the princess is right and decides not to punish himself anymore. He is relieved by her words and feels supported. Errol thanks Alexander for his support and promises to always be there for him. Her words inspire him to new feats and give him strength. Errol and Alexander stand side by side and their relationship strengthens. They both realize that together they can overcome any difficulties and dangers. Errol and Alexander finally find peace and harmony. Their combined efforts and support for each other gives them the strength to move forward and protect each other no matter what. Little Princess Errol sat on the floor with her doll in her arms, crying and calling for her mom. Aunt Lucinda, concerned about the girl's condition, fell senseless. Errol tried to wake her aunt in a panic, screaming that Lucinda had broken down. Errol, seeing her aunt unconscious, exclaimed, "Oops!" and tried to bring her to her senses. She was badly frightened and didn't know what to do next. When Lucinda finally woke up, Errol hugged her aunt and told her how scared she was. Lucinda apologized to Errol for scaring her so badly. They were both relieved. Lucinda asked Errol to never go outside without her aunt again. Errol, calming down, agreed that she would always stay close to her aunt so that something scary wouldn't happen. Lucinda remembered how their father had abandoned her and her sister when she was only 7 years old and her sister was 10. She shared this with Errol to explain her concern for her. Lucinda recounted how one day their drunken father gave them money to buy her and her sister something delicious. They were so happy about this gift that for a moment they forgot about everything. However, when they got home, their father was gone. Lucinda was very upset, but she and her sister had learned to cope together. Lucinda asked Errol to never leave her alone, and Errol promised that she would always be there for her. She realized how important it was to be together and support each other. As Errol lay on a huge teddy bear, Alexander remarked that she must be bored. He suggested that she wait just a year for things to change. Alexander offered the princess a ride on his shoulders in an attempt to entertain her. He tried to cheer her up despite the stern words of another maid who thought this behavior was inappropriate for the princess. Alexander, Princess Errol's guard, offered to take a walk through the garden carrying the little princess in his arms, which caused a storm of emotion in the others. Lucinda expressed her desire to join them, which surprised Alexander a bit and cheered up Errol. Lucinda suddenly decided to go with Alexander and Errol, which caused the guard a slight confusion, but he quickly adapted to the situation, continuing to carry the princess. Lucinda, Errol's aunt, joined them in the walk. Her appearance pleased everyone, especially the little princess, who was thrilled with the attention. Princess Errol, sitting on Alexander's shoulders, enjoyed the view and waved her arms carefree, marveling at the beauty of nature and feeling like a real princess in a fairy tale world. Lucinda expressed admiration for the way Alexander cared for the children, which caused him to smile and admit that he had a nephew that he also cared for. Lucinda asked Alexander if he had children of his own, to which he replied that he wasn't married yet, though he wasn't opposed to such questions himself. Alexander admitted that he'd been married several times, but his marriages had fallen apart due to family circumstances, causing Lucinda to sympathize slightly. The security guard shared his dreams that he hoped to meet his fated love before his life turned out the way he wanted it to. Lucinda, upon hearing Alexander's confession, asked him a question that caused him to be mildly surprised and ponder the future. Their walk through the garden ended amid bright greenery and spring flowers, leaving hope for a bright future and new meetings full of love and care. Errol's guard, Alexander, with a cheerful smile on his face, held the little princess on his shoulders. A joyful atmosphere hovered around them. Alexander suggested that Lucinda think about marriage, to which she embarrassedly replied that she hadn't thought about it. Errol listened to their conversation with interest. Lucinda, feeling that Alexander had touched on an important topic, excitedly admitted that she completely agreed with his words. Her heart was filled with warmth, and she noticed how Alexander was getting closer to her. Errol, noticing this, jumped up happily. Errol, on Alexander's shoulders, suddenly declared that she had absolutely no interest in marriage. Lucinda, laughing, supported her. In this situation, Alexander and Lucinda felt sincere affection for each other, which brought a smile to the faces of all three of them. Lucinda, Alexander, and Errol continued their walk through the blooming meadow. Errol began to get bored and suggested moving to her aunt's house, hinting at Lucinda. Alexander happily seconded her suggestion, realizing that the walk was tiring them all out. During the walk, Alexander noted that even a princess sometimes needed a friend. Errol, surprised by this remark, hesitated. Lucinda, holding her in her arms, felt that Alexander was hinting at his support and concern for them both. Alexander offered to bring his nephew to be Errol's friend. Lucinda, smiling, agreed, seeing how the gesture could bring their family closer together. Errol cheerfully supported the idea, dreaming of new adventures. Errol threw up her hands in joy and declared that she didn't care who her friend was, as long as it wasn't boring. This moment brought the three of them together, making them smile and feel like they were becoming a real family, ready for new adventures together. The golden-haired Errol returns home and Fenrir greets her respectfully, asking her the reason for her visit. Errol looks around and her gaze becomes stern. She declares that she needs no reason to return. The blue-haired Thesa looks at Errol unhappily, his eyes glowing with anger. He finds her demand for reasons to return absurd and expresses it with obvious irritation, increasing the tension in the room. Lucinda looks worriedly at Errol and asks what's wrong. Errol, still full of anger, says her name reproachfully, but does not reveal the reason for her behavior. Tessa recalls the rumors that Errol is lonely and mentions it sadly. He can see the pain in his eyes and thinks of ways to help his niece so she doesn't feel abandoned. At this time, Alexander with blue hair appears, laughing at the situation. He finds what is happening funny and starts laughing, which annoys Errol and increases her anger at those around her. During a conversation at the table, Lucinda and her daughter join the company. Alexander teases Tessa by recalling their previous flights, which makes Tessa embarrassed and annoyed. Tessa repents for his actions and feels he deserves to be punished. His anger changes to despair and he sincerely apologizes to everyone for his actions. Lucinda tries to comfort Tessu, telling him that it is not his fault. She explains that it's the fault of the familiar that caused all these problems, and her words bring some relief to Tessa. Errol, sitting with a bottle of milk, suddenly questions why everyone around her is looking at her like that. Her facial expression shows confusion and some anxiety about the attention of those around her. Lucinda notices that Errol is clearly in a bad mood and asks her what she is unhappy about. Errol, still full of emotion, can't put her feelings into words, but her look speaks for itself. Tessa looks at Errol thoughtfully, wondering if he scares her. His green eyes sparkle and a somber aura hovers around him, heightening the atmosphere of tension. Errol, a small girl with golden hair, looks at Tessu with surprise. Her eyes are large and green. She doesn't understand why he scares her. Lucinda, sitting at the table with Errol in her arms, explains the situation. Tessa and Alexander are nearby, in tense anticipation. The atmosphere becomes darker and more mysterious. Tessa holds Errol in her arms and shows her a beautiful flower. Errol pulls her arms happily, her eyes glowing with delight. Everything seems to be fine, but there is something dark lurking in the background. Tessa runs into Alexander and asks in amazement what he's doing here. Alexander says he was just passing by, but he is actually very concerned. Errol is in the company of her family and servants. They are enjoying some quiet time, but tension remains in the air. Tessa watches them from the corner, his gaze wary. Tessa plays with Errol, asking her questions. The girl laughs and says how much she enjoys playing. At this moment, she feels happy and carefree. Errol notices Tessa hiding behind a tree. She asks herself what he is doing. Tessa looks mysterious and anxious, adding to the sense of danger. Alexander tells Errol that her name is strong and meaningful. He tries to encourage her, but his face remains grim and hides his true emotions. Tessa explains to Errol that they have the same eye color, which means they are brothers. His words cause mixed feelings in her, joy and misunderstanding, creating intrigue in their relationship. The story begins with little Errol realizing her responsibility, announcing that she is now her family, for she is her brother's child. Tessa, her uncle, looks at her wistfully, remembering moments when she called him Daddy, which always amused him, though a bit embarrassed him. In the next episode, Tessa, trying to figure out how to properly care for a child, wonders how to keep an eye on Errol. He's having a hard time figuring it out and sighs as he feels a growing responsibility for her. Later, Tessa meets with Alexander, who wants to talk about the princess. Tessa is slightly distracted and asks him what he wanted to say, to which Alexander replies that he has a request regarding Errol. Alexander explains that he would like to bring his nephew to the palace so he can play with the princess. He believes it would do her good, as she seems lonely and bored lately. Tessa wonders why Errol needs a friend, since he himself has always tried to be her best friend and guardian. He sinks into thinking that perhaps she needs to socialize with someone her own age. Alexander continues to reassure Tessa that friends can share special feelings and create a bond that will benefit Errol. Tessa feels slight jealousy since he has always considered himself her family and best friend. Tessa wonders why he himself can't be her best friend and how he can get closer to her. He feels confused and a little guilty that he hasn't been able to provide her with everything she needs. Errol enters the room, wondering why she was called. Her presence instantly brightens the atmosphere, and Tessa feels his heart soften. He feels the strength of his affection for her again and decides that he must find a way to get closer to her. Tessa realizes that his job is to do whatever he can to make Errol feel happy and secure. He is willing to accept any help that will help him do that. His reflections lead to a decision. He will agree to Alexander's proposal so that his nephew can become Errol's friend. Tessa makes the decision to act for the sake of Errol's happiness. He realizes that truly caring for her is not only about fulfilling his duties, but also about making her feel needed and loved. The man with blue hair pondered how he could befriend the child. He was puzzled and didn't know where to start. His face showed tension and his gaze was focused, as if he was trying to find a solution to a difficult problem. Lucinda suggested that he meet Errol. Tessa replied that he wasn't particularly eager, clearly not seeing the point. However, he realized that it could be an important step in building a relationship. Lucinda tried to explain that she and Errol shared a familiar, and it might help them bond. Tessa continued to argue that it didn't matter, dismissing her idea. Lucinda asked how he played with the dolls. She tried to figure out how to connect with Errol through play, but Tessa was skeptical and didn't know how to answer. Lucinda reminded Tessa that he needed to do things that Errol liked. It was an important point that could help him better understand and gain the child's trust. Tessa began to ponder her words. Tessa suddenly smelled the scent of flowers. This unexpected sensation made him feel surprised and slightly confused, as if he remembered something from the past related to this scent. Errol, the little girl with golden hair, stopped her actions abruptly. She was flustered and looked at Tessa with a serious expression, trying to draw his attention to herself. Tessa, sitting in the chair, seemed annoyed and acted arrogant. Errol yelled at him, demanding that he stop coming, calling him an attractive fool. The question about the Emperor's affairs sounded like a rebuke. Errol looked at Tessa with a fake smile, calling him by his first name. She tried to hide her true feelings, but it was obvious to everyone around her. Thus, they continued to find ways to understand each other and build a relationship despite all the difficulties and internal conflicts. Errol turns to Tessa, seeing him for the first time after a long time, and asks if he knows her. She calls him Daddy, wondering at his reaction and trying to understand why he looks so worried. Tessa, on the other hand, looks at her puzzled, trying to remember. Lucinda hugs Errol and affectionately asks her who she is to her. Errol calls her Mom, even though Lucinda isn't her real mother, but Errol is confused about how she feels. Lucinda smiles and looks at Errol with maternal warmth as she holds her in her arms. Tessa sits in the room with Lucinda and Errol. Tessa assures everyone that Errol will recognize them, and Alexander agrees. He wonders why they've become friends. The room is lit with soft light, creating an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility, with Lucinda holding Errol on her lap. Errol is startled to see a white fox with many tails, Langrisa, and yells at her, accusing her of being scared. Langrisa looks at Errol curiously, her tails moving as if dancing in the wind, creating a mysterious and magical atmosphere. Errol wonders if her familiar Boo-Boo will become like Langrisa when she grows up. She watches the fox with delight as she ponders Boo-Boo's future. Langrisa, as if understanding her thoughts, looks calmly at Errol, nodding slightly in response. Langrisa assures Errol that it will happen soon. Errol is amazed that Langrisa understands her and can communicate with her. She exclaims excitedly, her eyes wide with wonder and her heart beating faster with excitement. Errol notices that Langrisa's fur looks very soft and wants to touch it. Langrisa offers to let her do so, causing the girl to gasp in delight. Errol reaches out and lightly touches the fluffy fur, feeling its warmth and softness. When Errol touches Langrisa's fur, she's surprised at how soft it is and exclaims enthusiastically about it. Her hand gently strokes the fox and she enjoys the sensation, forgetting her fears and doubts, fully immersing herself in the moment. In the background is a picture of Tessa, who is hugging Errol and Lucinda. In the front, Boo-Boo is seen flying towards them, his wings open and his eyes burning with determination and curiosity. The whole scene is filled with warmth and love. Langrisa greets Errol and Boo-Boo, standing majestically with her tails spread, creating an impressive and majestic scene. Her eyes shine with wisdom and power, and all around her the air seems to be filled with magic and mystery. Errol stood in the center of the room, frightened but happy. Boo-Boo flapped his wings, shouting out that she had almost died. Tessa stood beside her, hugging her and comforting her, and Lucinda held little Amelia in her arms, smiling. It was a moment of joy and relief. Langrisa, a large white fox, approached the group. She apologized, explaining that she smelled a sweet scent and couldn't resist. Tessa only grinned, realizing that familiars could sometimes give in to their instincts. Tessa, clearly annoyed, roughly nudged Langrisa to the side, ordering her to move. Lucinda noticed his manner and rebuked him for his rudeness, but Tessa took no notice, focused on his thoughts. Errol, clutching Amelia tightly to her, watched Alexander, who exhaled in relief. Lucinda, looking at Tessa, tried to figure out what was going on, but he only nodded for her to continue. The situation was getting tense when Lucinda noticed Errol blushing as she looked at Alexander. She said his name quietly, embarrassed by her feelings. Alexander, for his part, was focused on guarding the princess. Lucinda, holding Amelia, watched Alexander walk away. She thought to herself that he was very manly. Boo-Boo was also impressed with his strength. Lucinda urged herself to pull herself together, for it was not the right moment to get emotional. Tessa, looking at Lucinda, explained that familiars were prone to evil and could sometimes disobey their masters. He emphasized the importance of control and willpower to subdue them and not allow them to underestimate themselves. In another part of the room, Lucinda was holding Amelia when Alexander approached them. Errol, not understanding what was going on, asked a question. Alexander replied that nothing was going according to plan, and it was the fault of everyone involved. Tessa, holding his head with his hands, lamented that nothing was going as he had planned. Lucinda tried to console him, but he only replied that this was life and continued to reflect on the situation. All the characters experienced their inner conflicts and tried to find a way out of the difficult situation, each in their own way overcoming fears and doubts. The servants discuss that Alexander may be tired or having difficulty bonding with Princess Errol. They make assumptions while worrying about their master and his condition. Little Princess Errol comes running in excitedly, joyfully announcing her arrival. She looks happy and full of energy, which lifts the spirits of those around her. Errol enjoys her moment of freedom, happily exclaiming that this is her life. She seems very content and relaxed as she cuddles her soft toys. Errol begins to wonder why Alexander doesn't come to see her. She's grown accustomed to his constant presence and begins to worry about his absence. Her anxiety increases when she calls Alexander and demands his attention. Errol calls him Papa, showing how much she is attached to him. Alexander finally appears, and Errol is overjoyed at his return. She exclaims emotionally, repeating how much she has missed him. This demonstrates their close bond. Fenrir informs her that the request has been approved and offers to escort Errol to the main palace. This is important to the little princess, as she always gets what she wants. Errol feels incredibly lucky, realizing that she is always lucky. Her eyes shine with joy, she enjoys the moment and does not hide her emotions. A carriage drawn by white horses awaits the princess. Alexander, Fenrir, and the others are ready to accompany Errol, emphasizing the importance of this event. Errol in the carriage joyfully shouts that she is on her way to see her Uncle Thies. She is overwhelmed with anticipation and excitement, looking forward to the meeting and new adventures. Errol and Alexander walk along a beautiful forest path surrounded by bright blue butterflies. A soft light illuminates their path, creating an atmosphere of magic. The butterflies float around them, making them feel like they have entered a fairy tale. Errol speaks with admiration to Alexander about how amazed she is by the Emperor's secret garden. Her eyes burn with delight and a smile glows on her face. Alexander, equally amazed, is also enjoying the walk. Lucinda, dressed in an elegant gown, notices the beauty around her and shares her impressions with Errol. The girl agrees with her, both enjoying the moment, surrounded by nature and butterflies. Tessa, carrying Errol on his shoulders, explains that one can only enter the Emperor's palace with permission, and this is his first visit to the place. Errol is thrilled that this is their first time here together, and her joy is transferred to Tessa as well. Errol eagerly asks where Tessa is, if he is alive. She longs to see him as soon as possible and can't hide her excitement as she holds on to her uncle's hair. Tessa appears on their way, surrounded by courtiers. They all look solemn, and Tessa is the center of attention. Errol recognizes him from afar and exclaims with joy. Tessa, dressed in an elegant suit, looks majestic and dignified. His beauty and elegance amaze everyone around him. Errol admires him while in his company. Tessa greets Errol and her companions, creating an atmosphere of warmth and joy. Errol cheerfully tells her uncle how happy she is to see him and thanks him for the opportunity to be here. Errol repeats the words Tessa said in confusion and can't believe her ears. Her surprise and joy overwhelm her. She can't hide her excitement and happiness. Tessa is serious. He explains what has happened. His words make Errol anxious, and she feels that something important has happened. Her face reflects anxiety and anticipation. Tessa, holding little Princess Errol in his arms, thinks about how children love to be picked up. At that moment, he suddenly gets into a funny situation, losing his balance and almost falling to the floor. His amused grimace elicits laughter from everyone around him. Lucinda, watching this scene, notices that not all children like such games, but Princess Amelia especially loves riding on shoulders. Her joyful face lights up the entire room, and Lucinda feels a warm satisfaction. Errol looks at Tessa in surprise, wondering why he is looking at her so strangely. Tessa tries to figure out what's wrong, and his confused look causes her confusion. She begins to worry if something serious has happened. Amelia on Tessa's shoulders is perplexed. Is it really a crime to ride on her shoulders? Her innocent look brings a smile to those around her, and she tries to understand why the adults are reacting this way. Tessa, tensely watching Errol, admits that her eyes frighten him. This tension makes Errol feel like something is wrong, and she tries to understand why her gaze has that effect on him. An astonished Errol watches as the man with green eyes and shiny hands calls her to him, offering her something magical and unknown. Her heart sinks in anticipation of something wonderful and mysterious. Errol willingly climbs onto the man's shoulders, enjoying the fun. Her happiness and delight can be seen on her face, creating an atmosphere of joy. At this moment, she feels the happiest in the world. Lucinda realizes that there is a special magic behind it all. Tessa looks at them, feeling a mixture of joy and excitement for Errol. You can see the concern in his eyes, and he hopes that everything will be okay. Errol exclaims in surprise, realizing that Tessa wanted to lift her up all along. This sudden realization makes her both surprised and happy. Her heart fills with gratitude to Tessa. Tessa, Lucinda, and the servants watch in amazement at Errol, who laughs loudly, urging everyone to look at her. This scene is filled with happiness and warmth, and everyone feels that this is a moment of true marital happiness. Alexander, not knowing what to do with little Errol, felt confused. Tessa, noticing his confusion, advised Alexander to do as he saw fit, which stunned Alexander. Tessa suggested a walk around the garden, as they usually did. Alexander agreed, hoping it would calm Errol down and help distract her from her crankiness. They began their leisurely stroll among the flowers and butterflies. Half the day passed in the stroll, but Tessa suddenly stopped everyone, concerned about Errol's condition. The girl continued to be cranky, refusing to look at anything around her, expressing her stubbornness. Lucinda, holding Errol in her arms, tried to calm her down by pointing at the flowers and butterflies. However, Errol stubbornly turned away, not wanting to look at anything, which caused concern for everyone. Alexander, trying to interest Errol, noticed that they had the same eye color. This unexpected detail caught the girl's attention, and she looked at Alexander with surprise and interest. Errol, a little embarrassed, realized that this common trait made them closer to each other. She realized that it meant they were family, which was an important moment for her. Lucinda, happy that Alexander had found an approach to Errol, hugged him gratefully. She expressed her joy at having him as her uncle, filling everyone with warmth and peace. Raffaello, watching what was happening, waited with interest for Alexander to share his impressions of the walk. His sincere participation in everything did not go unnoticed. Tessa noted that Alexander had grown closer to the princess, which caused everyone to be surprised. Despite his strict appearance, Alexander showed his caring and warm nature, which pleased everyone. Raffaello smiled, explaining that the emperor was actually very soft-hearted. This explanation made everyone realize that Alexander really does care for the little Princess Errol as if she were his own family. Raffaello advises Alexander to stay close to the princess to make her vulnerable like Loida once was. He asks how things are going with permission for Leon to enter the palace. Alexander replies that he hasn't gotten permission yet. Raffaello asks the reason for the delay, expressing obvious displeasure. Alexander informs him that his request has not yet been answered. Raffaello continues to clarify why the authorization has not been received, and Alexander is forced to admit that no specific reason is known yet. This causes Raffaello to become even more irritated. Raffaello decides that they have enough time to try again, and praises Alexander for a job well done. Alexander agrees with his boss, remaining confident in his abilities. Alexander meets his sister and young son Leon. The sister happily notes how much Leon has grown. Alexander confirms that the boy now runs fast. The sister wonders how things are going with the princess escort. Alexander, looking at his son, replies that the princess likes him very much and continues with his duties. The sister admires how Alexander is handling the tasks, but notices his concerned expression and asks him to explain what is wrong. Alexander is holding Leon in his arms at this point. She asks if Leon eats chocolate. Alexander replies that he is too young for it yet, and he plans to give him chocolate when the boy is a little older. Alexander recalls offering chocolate to Lucinda once, but she didn't know what it was. This causes him to have mixed feelings about the princess. His sister interrupts Alexander's musings, turning his attention to the tasks at hand. Alexander, holding Leon in his arms, contemplates his actions regarding the princess. Alexander's sister remarked that Alexander always follows his father's orders rather than his own wishes, and expressed her desire for him to pursue what he enjoys. Alexander was touched by her words and thanked her for her support. Alexander warns little Princess Errol about the dangers of excessive chocolate consumption, but Errol, full of energy and desire, demands a double portion despite the warnings. Alexander is delighted that Errol already knows how to count. Errol is upset when she doesn't get what she wants and begins to cry, which causes Alexander concern. He tries to comfort her, but her tears flow in an endless stream, causing him to apologize and offer a compromise. Alexander tries to get Errol to agree to one portion, but she persistently demands two. He is amazed at her insistence and attempt to bargain, but still agrees to her terms, giving in to her at the end. Errol, feeling victorious, agrees to Alexander's terms and offers to jump together as a symbol of their arrangement. Alexander lifts her onto his shoulders with a smile, showing his affection and support. Alexander realizes that Errol's calmness and her instant joy is more important than any punishment from the strict Penril. He makes a deal with the little princess, promising her freedom in exchange for obedience. Errol, soothed and happy, falls asleep in her bed. Alexander wishes her sweet dreams, watching her peaceful sleep, and noting to himself that she is quite different from the other children in her uniqueness and character. Suddenly, Boo Boo's familiar, a cat with wings, appears and asks grudgingly why he has been summoned. Errol looks at him with curiosity and affection, expressing his gratitude for his appearance. Errol offers Boo Boo chocolate, promising that she won't call him every time she needs something. Boo Boo looks at the offer skeptically, but accepts it, expressing his agreement and surprise. Errol, Alexandra, and Boo Boo find common ground and reach an understanding that strengthens their bond and brings joy to each of them. Princess Errol approaches her winged cat, Boo Boo, who gracefully asks what his mistress desires. The girl realizes that the cat is easily bribed and decides to use this to her advantage. Boo Boo looks at her with slight surprise, but is willing to honor her request. Errol, without wasting time, asks Boo Boo to take her to the place where he left her last time. The cat, a little surprised, agrees, but asks for clarification on what else she has planned. Errol confidently explains that she wants to return to that spot to continue her explorations. However, all of a sudden, Errol begins to feel nauseous, which causes Boo Boo to panic. He looks at her fearfully, dreading the consequences. Boo Boo promises that he won't let it go unpunished if she decides to throw up on him. Errol tries to calm down, but her health is deteriorating. Errol, feeling ill, complains to Boo Boo that she is going to throw up. The cat panics, not knowing what to do. He asks her to bear with him for a while he figures out how to help her. However, it only gets worse for Errol, and she starts to cry. Errol falls to the ground and notices that she seems to have fallen on something. She looks around puzzled, trying to figure out what exactly happened. Boo Boo flies closer to help her up and figure out the reason for her fall. The girl looks confused and scared. Soon, Errol sees a boy with brown hair, Siku, who is also hurt. He is sitting on the ground, slightly hurt from the fall. Errol runs up to him to make sure he's okay. She excitedly examines him, checking for injuries. Errol, carefully approaching Sika, asks if he's in pain. The boy assures her that everything is fine and he can handle the pain. Errol calms down slightly, but is still worried about her friend. She promises that she won't let situations like this happen again. Suddenly, Boo Boo catches Errol's attention, and she gets angry at him, calling him a rascal for his act. Boo Boo flies in the air, not realizing what is happening. Errol expresses her outrage, blaming the cat for what happened. Boo Boo begins to make excuses, but the girl is not ready to listen to him. Errol eventually finds something attractive about Sika. She admiringly declares that Sika is handsome and cute, which makes Boo Boo jealous. The cat cannot hide his feelings and tries to divert Errol's attention from the boy. The girl, in turn, laughs at his jealousy. Boo Boo, though slightly jealous, realizes that his mistress only likes handsome boys and decides to accept it, realizing that it is not worth fighting with the princess. He flies around, watching her reaction to Siku. Errol, feeling better, hugs his friend and thanks Boo Boo for helping him. Sika, a boy with brown hair, embarrassedly states that he wasn't expecting Errol. He tries to hide his feelings, but his blushing cheeks betray his excitement. Errol, the little princess with golden hair, admiringly calls him cute, which embarrasses the boy even more. Errol cheerfully calls out to her familiar, a cat with wings named Boo Boo. She offers him a toy, but Boo Boo seems shocked. Errol laughs lightheartedly as she enjoys playing on the lawn. Sika, accepting the toy from Errol, thanks her profusely. Errol, smiling happily, states that she likes Sika. The boy, a little embarrassed, begins to realize that this is the first time anyone has ever said such warm words to him. Sika, taken aback by Errol's words, realizes that this is the first time he has heard someone say that they like him. He looks surprised and a little confused, but a spark of joy begins to appear in his eyes. Ariel, seeing Sika's confusion, takes pity on him, asking what kind of life he had if no one ever gave him gifts. Sika quietly confesses that he has never received a gift before, which makes the moment even more touching. Ariel decides that she will tell Sika how much she likes him over and over again. She screams with joy and calls Sika beautiful and cool, which further amazes the boy, but also fills his heart with warmth. Errol, seeing that Sika is finally smiling, hugs him. The boy, still surprised, hugs her back. Errol feels over the moon that she was able to make Sika happy. Errol, looking at Sika with delight, calls him handsome and good. Sika, as he hugs the princess, feels his heart fill with joy and warmth. For the first time, he feels needed and important. Sika, filled with gratitude and happiness, thinks that next time he will definitely give Errol something special. He smiles, planning how to make the princess as happy as she made him. Errol, happy and satisfied, looks at Sika with love. She feels that she has found in him a true friend who will always be there for her. Sika, in turn, realizes that he has found not only a friend, but also a new family. Errol stands outside the castle and thinks about the next time she will definitely fulfill her plan. She stares resolutely at the majestic structure, hiding her thoughts and fears behind a mask of confidence. Her upcoming adventure is becoming more and more real. Errol meets Mrs. Ricardo, who anxiously asks where she has been. The woman in the scarlet dress is clearly unhappy about the boy's disappearance, her voice full of anxiety and bewilderment. Errol feels guilty about her unauthorized walk. Mrs. Ricardo reminds Sika how worried she is about him and says that she has already warned him repeatedly not to wander off. Her voice is a mixture of anger and concern, which makes Sika feel even more guilty. Mrs. Ricardo examines Sika closely, asking if he has met someone. Her suspicions make the boy uneasy, and he feels that his secrets may be revealed. The woman's gaze is insistent and penetrating. At that moment, Boo Boo appears, a small winged cat who is always willing to help if he has chocolate. His joking remark lightens the atmosphere a little. Errol smiles, realizing that Boo Boo will always be there when he needs support. Boo Boo informs Errol that he overheard some important information. The boy Sika was dating is named Ricardo. His rumors make Errol curious and worried. She wants to know more about what is going on around her. Errol wonders who Mrs. Ricardo is. The information provided by Boo Boo seems insufficient to her. Her thoughts are full of questions and assumptions, but she decides to figure things out for herself. Errol wakes up in her room and sees Lucinda greeting her. The smile on the woman's face gives Errol confidence. This morning moment shows how important the close people she calls her parents are to Errol. Lucinda carefully asks if Errol has gotten enough sleep or if she wants to sleep some more. Errol, happy and full of energy, happily replies, "Mommy," and throws herself into her arms. This moment shows their deep connection and love. Lucinda tells Errol that she will be a joy to people and should be as strong for them as she is for her. Errol promises to become strong and confident. There is a warmth and support in their embrace that helps Errol believe in her strength and dreams. Errol, a little girl with golden hair and a pink bow, tries to keep up with Mrs. Ricardo, which leads to some interesting events. Fenrir notices this and wonders about Errol's motives. Errol remembers that she does not want to look inferior to Mrs. Ricardo. She decides to act to make herself look her best, but this causes Fenrir to sympathize with the girl. Fenrir sees that Errol is covered in dirt and smells strange. Errol doesn't understand what this is about, but Fenrir expresses concern, wondering why the girl was in such a state. Alexander, Errol's blue-haired guard, forbids her from doing anything, apparently because of the danger. He is clearly worried about the princess's safety. Errol disagrees with Alexander and shows persistence. Her determination causes mixed feelings in those around her, but they see that she is willing to fight for what is hers. Alexander tries to stop Errol again, reminding her that she is not allowed to eat chocolate. He does this in earnest, but sees that firm words and hands don't always resonate. Errol insists on doing her own thing and urges Alexander to take action. She is sure he wants it too and tries to convince him. Suddenly, a stern woman in black appears, observing what is happening. She asks Alexander what he is doing, creating a tense atmosphere. The situation becomes more tense when the stern woman starts to get to the bottom of what is going on. Errol and Alexander find themselves in the spotlight, and everyone waits to see what happens next. Errol, with golden hair, is sitting with Alexander and enjoying some sweets. Suddenly, a strict Fenrir appears and reminds them that unhealthy snacks are forbidden. Alexander tries to justify himself by claiming it wasn't chocolate, and Errol looks at them with innocent eyes. Fenrir demands Errol's intervention, but she doesn't understand what's wrong. Finally, Fenrir, sighing, decides to pretend she didn't notice anything, because today is a special day. She leaves, leaving Errol and Alexander puzzled. Alexander reminds Errol that today is an important day. Errol, a little confused, asks what exactly is going on. Alexander explains that today is the day they've been talking about for a long time and smiles. Errol, with huge green eyes, finally realizes that today is the day of her princess title ceremony. Her face lights up with joy, and she looks forward to the events to come. Fenrir tells Errol that the appointment ceremony will end when His Majesty places the tiara on her. After that, the celebratory ball will begin. Errol is a little nervous, but still excited for such an important event. For Errol's comfort, the ball will begin at 4 in the afternoon. Fenrir begins preparations for the party, and Errol, slightly tired, thinks to herself that even hearing the word ball is already tiring. Errol sits in a chair and ponders if she is destined to be queen. Her thoughts are interrupted by her nanny, who is preparing her for the ball, asking her questions, but Errol answers a little absent-mindedly, thinking of her own. Lucinda, Errol's aunt, is getting ready for the ceremony. She looks ravishing in her gorgeous dress and jewelry. Errol marvels at how beautiful Lucinda is when she dresses up for such an important event. Errol, full of determination, promises to find Lucinda a suitable companion for the ball. She is pleased with her plan and is already envisioning how everything will play out. The ball itself begins. All the guests, dressed in elegant outfits, gather in the magnificent hall. Errol feels like a real princess and enjoys this important day, surrounded by the attention and care of her loved ones. Errol watches with rapt attention the beautiful dresses hanging on the balustrade, shining under the lights. Her childlike admiration conveys her sincere joy, while Alexander nearby watches her closely, remaining in the shadow of her delight. Fenrir, elegant and stern, announces that the princess will enter the hall with His Majesty. Alexander nods, realizing the importance of the moment and preparing to escort the princess. Errol, in her lovely outfit, is determined to show all her virtues as befits a princess. However, she recognizes that she has a different purpose today, aimed at something important to her. When the Baroness arrives, Errol exclaims with surprise and joy, "Mommy!" Her huge green eyes sparkle with joy, filling the room with warmth. Lucinda, smiling and bright, enters the room, and Errol screams with joy at seeing her aunt. Her heart fills with happiness at the long-awaited meeting. Errol notices with disappointment that Lucinda is not dressed up for the ball. Although Lucinda still looks beautiful, Errol feels that she should have tried harder for such an event. Lucinda explains that it's her duty to take care of the princess and that she couldn't afford to wear a screaming outfit. Errol calms down a bit, but still feels a slight disappointment. Errol reflects that it doesn't matter that Lucinda dressed up on a day like this. She realizes that her aunt always took care of her, and that was what mattered most to her. Lucinda tells Errol that she is extraordinarily sweet today. Errol feels a warmth fill her heart at these words, and she smiles back sincerely. Lucinda calls Errol the sweetest baby in the world, which causes the princess to feel a wave of tenderness and happiness. She shouts "Abu" and asks her aunt to be as sweet as herself so that the joy is complete. Errol, the little girl with golden hair, curses the ball with a cry. She is desperate and cries out, "Damn the ball!" Her feelings are overwhelming and she feels lost and annoyed. Her familiar, a cat with wings named Boo Boo, appears out of nowhere and offers his help. Errol calls out to him, expressing her desire to leave this place, and her request seems quite desperate. Boo Boo, pleased with the order, finally hears something that pleases him. He is willing to help Errol and shows his readiness for action, which brings the girl some hope of salvation. Errol, turning her attention to the green-haired young man, notices the flower. Her gaze is full of surprise and interest, and she floats in the air with Boo Boo by her side, as if enchanted by this unexpected encounter. The young man takes Errol in his arms, and the girl admiringly calls him handsome. It's as if she found something special in him that attracted her attention and aroused tender feelings. The young man, a little embarrassed, asks where she came from. Errol, looking him in the eye, briefly replies, "Boo," alluding to her sudden and unexpected appearance. Errol accuses Boo Boo of dropping her. She thinks he's a repeat offender and asks if he was hired to kill her. Boo Boo, however, responds by saying he knows everything and advises her to lose weight, which angers Errol even more. The young man admires Errol's beauty but notes that she is different from Tessa. He describes her facial features and talks about her special grace, which makes Errol feel special. Meeting the green-haired young man raises many questions for Errol, and she notices that his beauty is different from Tessa's. She compares his facial features and tries to understand why he looks at her that way. The appearance of a new girl who calls the young man by the name of Errol catches Errol's attention. The girl utters "ma" in surprise and bewilderment as she sees everyone around her start to coalesce into one big picture. Lucinda looked out from the balcony, hearing someone calling her name. She explained that she was a floor below and began to climb down to see what had happened. Errol, a little princess with golden hair, stood below smiling and said she was fine, assuring her Aunt Lucinda that she wasn't in any pain at all. Lucinda, concerned about Errol's condition, rushed over to her. Errol continued to smile, showing that she was fine, but Lucinda still looked worried. Lucinda, seeing Errol on the edge of the balcony, shuddered in fear. The Baroness and the maid also looked worried, not knowing what was going on. Aunt Lucinda grabbed Errol and held her close. She was frightened but hugged her niece in relief, glad that everything was all right. Aunt Lucinda told Errol that her heart almost went to her heels with fear for her. Errol, smiling, assured her aunt that she was fine, hugging her back. Lucinda gave Errol a stern look and warned her not to do that again. Errol, a little hurt, nodded, agreeing with her aunt, and promised to be more careful. Meanwhile, a man with green hair approached them. It was Tessu, Errol's uncle. He asked if everything was all right, looking at them with concern. Lucinda, still hugging Errol, told Tessu what had happened. Tessu thanked her for saving his niece and said that she was a true hero. Tessu and Lucinda stood side by side, and Errol looked at them cheerfully, feeling safe. Lucinda promised Tessu that she would always protect Errol, and Tessu smiled back, grateful for her concern. Pietro, the Baron's son, humbly introduces himself to Errol, who is a princess. He tells her that his father was granted Baron status last year, and they now live a more affluent life. Errol looks at him with interest and responds politely to his words, feeling a slight excitement. Pietro takes an interest in Errol's life, asking what she will tell him about herself. The princess is slightly embarrassed, but prepares to answer, recalling important moments in her life that she would like to share. Her cheeks turn slightly pink with embarrassment. At that moment, Fenrir, a servant, bursts into the hall with a shout about the princess's condition, causing panic among those present. She waves her arms, getting everyone's attention, and looks very agitated. Everyone turns around at the noise and freezes in anticipation. She, barely catching her breath, begins to justify that her heart can barely withstand such upheaval, recalling the events of the recent past. The servant looks very concerned, her hands shaking, and she looks at Errol with concern and worry. Lucinda, holding little Errol in her arms, reports that the princess is safe, thanks to Pietro's help. She asks that the royal physician be summoned to examine her to make sure that Errol is okay. Lucinda looks calm, but you can see the motherly concern in her eyes. Fenrir insists that a royal physician is necessary, but Lucinda assures her that it is not necessary. Meanwhile, Thesa, Errol's uncle, keeps an eye on what is happening, trying to assess the situation. His face remains impenetrable, but his eyes show interest and slight concern. Errol, a little frightened, explains that it's all the fault of Boo Boo the cat, who is a familiar. He is a little afraid of Tessu, which makes her laugh. Boo Boo looks at Tessu warily, which makes the situation even more comical. Lucinda, holding Errol, asks her why she is looking at Tessu so intently. The girl looks away embarrassed, her small hands clenched tightly on Lucinda's clothes. Errol tries to hide from the attentive stares of those around her. Tessa looks serious and wonders if Errol is angry, ready to burst into tears if she is scolded. His voice is stern, but there is an undercurrent of kindness in it. Errol starts to get nervous and her eyes fill with tears. But Tessa realizes that it's all because of Boo Boo, who decided to make another joke. Errol, eyes wide, confirms this, causing everyone present to smile. Tessa sighs quietly and smiles demurely, realizing that the situation has been resolved peacefully. Errol, the little girl with golden hair, cries out excitedly, blaming Boo Boo, the cat with wings, for her helplessness. Boo Boo defends himself, blaming Errol's heaviness for making him unable to handle the situation. Lucinda, holding Errol in her arms, looks at Boo Boo indignantly. He continues to make excuses, claiming that his inability almost caused trouble for Errol. Lucinda is relieved that everything ended safely. Tessa, a man with blue hair, offers to take Errol in his arms. His determined gaze inspires confidence, and Lucinda does not hesitate to hand the girl over to him, trusting his care. Noble and stately, Tessa thanks Pietro, the Baron's son, for saving his niece. His words are filled with sincere appreciation, promising to express his gratitude more weightily later. Pietro smiles modestly, assuring that he has done nothing special. His modesty and kindness are evident, and he embarrassedly accepts the thanks, not considering his actions a feat. Tessa stares intently at Lucinda, telling her to clean herself up. Her embarrassment causes a slight blush, but she promises to do whatever it takes to meet his expectations. Lucinda, excusing herself to Tessa, says that her concern for him caused her to look restless. Tessa is stern but caring, rebuking her for her restlessness, but Lucinda senses his genuine concern. Fenril, a woman with black hair, comments worriedly on Tessa's strict and cold nature, saying that he is not suited for the role of protector. Tessa, however, advises her to calm down, showing her confidence. Errol, observing everything that is happening, declares emphatically that she will not allow the events from the original story to happen again. Her determination and willingness to fight for her destiny is admired by those around her. Tessa, holding Errol in her arms, sets off with Lucinda, showing her determination and willingness to protect her niece. Their struggle for a better future together is just beginning, and each step brings them closer to their goal. Pietro recalls that his parents married out of convenience. However, over time, they fell in love with each other and lived happily. This makes him wonder about the nature of marriage and love in aristocratic society. Pietro ponders that all nobles live similarly, with no room for sympathy. He realizes that marriage for the nobility is not a romantic feeling, but rather a convention and a means to build a family and strengthen ties. Lucinda, Aunt Errol, finds a beautiful dress and admires it. She wonders who could have sent such a magnificent garment. Her thoughts are filled with curiosity and mild admiration. Lucinda realizes that if she wears this dress, she will not be able to care for Errol properly. She finds herself in a difficult situation where choosing between beauty and duty seems impossible. Lucinda reminds herself that she is in the imperial palace and is respected because of Errol. She realizes the importance of her role and the responsibility placed upon her. Fenril, a servant, sharply chides Lucinda for her reckless act. She is concerned that Lucinda could have injured and even endangered Princess Ariel, which causes her grave concern. Fenril continues her criticism, noting that Lucinda could have been hurt, and the princess could have been in danger as well. Lucinda feels guilty and realizes the seriousness of the situation. Lucinda realizes that she must not forget important truths and her responsibilities. She mentally reiterates to herself the need to remain responsible and not give in to temptation so as not to endanger her family. In the tense atmosphere, Lucinda feels the pressure building, and she realizes that she must make the right choice. Her thoughts are filled with anxiety about the future and the rightness of her actions. Pietro, the Baron's son, observes all that is happening and draws conclusions about the importance of family ties and responsibilities. He realizes that in their world, every step has consequences, and love can arise even where it was not expected. Lucinda, with golden hair at a loss, asks Mistress Fenril if everything is all right. Fenril looks worried, which adds to Lucinda's anxiety. Fenril, following His Majesty's decree, orders Lucinda to change her robes, as the title ceremony will also take place today. Lucinda agrees, realizing the importance of the upcoming event. Immersed in her thoughts, Lucinda stands at the window and contemplates the title ceremony. She is overwhelmed by various emotions: excitement, anxiety, and anticipation. A memory catches up with Lucinda. Once upon a time, Lady Fenril lost her young child. These thoughts fill her heart with sadness and compassion. Lucinda encounters Pietro, who tells her the sad story of how the child Fenril fell from the second floor and broke her neck. This tragic event has become famous in high society. Pietro explains that evil tongues sarcastically claim that Fenril became an etiquette teacher because of this accident. However, he thinks it is better to hear the story from Fenril herself. Pietro, introducing himself again, says that he is Baron Pietro and asks Lucinda's name. She replies that her name is Lucinda and she is going to get the last name Gianen today. Lucinda sincerely thanks Pietro for his support on this important day. Pietro, in turn, notes that it is Lucinda who has been brave, which gives her confidence. This day is filled with significant events for Lucinda. and her gratitude to Pietro emphasizes the importance of support and understanding at times like these. Their companionship strengthens her spirit and readiness for the challenges ahead. Errol, with golden hair in a light-colored dress, greeted the guests, her gaze joyful and trusting. She looked at Pietro, the Baron's son, and said hopefully that she hoped to see him again next time. Errol was sitting in an armchair wearing a pink dress and with blonde hair when her Uncle Tessa came up to her, holding her in his arms. She greeted him with sincere joy, calling him, "Your Majesty." Tessa appeared among the guests in the sumptuous hall, holding Errol in his arms. Everyone looked at them with admiration, while Errol herself, holding back her embarrassment, watched proudly. Tessa, with his blue hair and stern face, held Errol in his arms, who clung to him. Her eyes showed fear and at the same time admiration at what was happening. Tessa asked everyone to raise their heads, and the hall fell into silence, waiting for his words. Errol watched the reactions of those around her with curiosity and excitement, feeling like an important part of this moment. Boo-Boo's familiar, a cat with wings, sat next to Errol and spoke proudly of his cleverness and abilities. But Errol couldn't help herself, and Riley reminded her that Boo-Boo had already dropped her twice. Tessa was carrying Errol in his arms with a serious look, holding himself confidently. In his other hand, he held Boo-Boo, who looked equally serious. Errol felt safe being near her uncle. The people in the hall, upon seeing Booba, were surprised and delighted. One of the guests, shocked, exclaimed that it was a familiar, and his admiration knew no bounds. A discussion began among the guests, whether it was really a surname and what its origin was. The women whispered, radiating surprise and delight. Errol watched their reactions with curiosity. Someone remarked that Boo-Boo resembled the late Emperor Lloyd's surname. Errol, hearing this, felt proud of her friend and his importance in this world. Errol, a little girl with golden hair, was introduced as the only daughter of the great Emperor Lloyd. Tessa, her uncle, proudly announced this, emphasizing her importance and heritage. Errol, clad in a pink dress and topped with a glittering crown, was named Princess of the Land and given the surname Illuminous. Her outfit and crown emphasized her royal status. The crown seemed to be too big for her small head, and Errol frowned as she tried to hold it in place. This moment showed her innocence and childlike directness. Tessa comforted Errol, telling her that the crown would soon fit her as the children of the Illuminous family grew quickly. This reassured the girl and gave her confidence. Errol, while in Tessa's arms, lovingly called him Daddy, showing how attached she was to her uncle. This moment showed their close and warm relationship. Tessa, holding Errol in his arms, thought about how silly his niece was, but didn't hide his love for her. Errol, on the other hand, looked at him with adoration. Errol admitted that she liked Tessa, calling him Daddy. She was expressing her childlike affection and love, which was endearing to those around her. Errol suggested that Tessa live happily together, showing her dream of a carefree and joyful life with those she loves. This scene conveyed her desire for marital happiness. Alexander, Errol's security guard, sternly stated that he would confiscate her chocolates for a year. This showed his attempts to discipline her and keep order. Errol began to cry, begging Alexander to return the chocolate, blaming it all on Booba. She couldn't fly and demanded her favorite treat back, which made Alexander smile. Errol, sitting on a red throne with a doll in her arms, notices that there are many worthy candidates around. She is confident that she can find a groom for her Aunt Lucinda and admits that the ball was great. Tessa, blue hair in hand, looks forward seriously and invites the attendees to come closer. His stern gaze emphasizes the importance of the event taking place. Lucinda and Tessa sit on the throne, drawing the attention of the audience. Lucinda holds Errol in her arms as life boils around them, and people try to get closer so as not to hurt anyone. When no one approaches, Errol blames it on Tessa, saying that he's the reason everyone is afraid. Tessa remains impassive and cold, which only adds to the tension in the room. Lucinda asks Tessa to at least smile a little or walk away if he can't change his behavior. Her soft words and concern for her daughter heighten the contrast with Tessa's sternness. Suddenly, a woman in a red dress, Mrs. Ricardo, appears and greets everyone. Her elegant and confident appearance immediately attracts attention and causes a slight tension among those present. Tessa, upon seeing her, wonders who this stranger is. His wariness and curiosity make him scrutinize her every move. Mrs. Ricardo notices Tessa and replies that she did not expect him to grant her an audience. She apologizes for her haste and hopes for understanding from those present. She explains that she was anxious to get a chance to care for Princess Amelia, demonstrating her sincere intentions. Her soft and respectful tone evokes sympathy and trust. Thus, ambition, love, and duty intertwine in this emotionally intense encounter, creating an intriguing atmosphere where each participant plays an important role. Errol, a little girl with golden hair, is surprised when she hears that someone thinks she is adorable. Her reaction is full of bewilderment as she did not expect such a compliment and looks puzzled. Errol's Aunt Lucinda notices that Mrs. Fenriel is teaching the girl etiquette, but she is still too young. Mrs. Ricardo, standing nearby, asks if Errol needs a nanny, expressing doubts about her independence. Mrs. Ricardo contemplates her ambitions to take Lucinda's place, who has long cared for Errol. Her eyes sparkle with a desire for more power and influence at court. Thesa, Errol's uncle, sits on the throne and notes that the princess already has enough people taking care of her. He is clearly happy with the current state of affairs and sees no need for additional nannies. Mrs. Ricardo, in the red dress, continues to insist, mentioning that she has heard of possible changes in the princess's entourage. Her confidence is beginning to raise suspicions. Lucinda, sitting on the throne, notices that the young girl in question used to be an ordinary commoner. Her comment is full of skepticism and distrust of Mistress Ricardo's abilities. Tessa, looking straight ahead, adds that even if he brings someone from a lower class, he will still be as good as Mrs. Ricardo. His words provoke a storm of emotion in his interlocutors. Mrs. Ricardo loses patience and demands to stop talking nonsense and leave. Her irritation turns to anger, but she tries to remain outwardly calm. She reminds everyone that she once served the late Emperor Lloyd with all her heart. Her words are filled with resentment and frustration at her current situation. Tessa, not holding back, warns her not to mention her brother with such disdain again. Anger blazes in his eyes, and he is not going to tolerate such words against his family. The man with blue hair, Alexander, restrains his anger and demands that the intruder leave the room, showing mercy. The women present watch in shock, their faces expressing a mixture of surprise and relief. Errol, sitting on her Aunt Lucinda's lap, apologizes for what happened. One of the guests is surprised that the girl served Lloyd and wonders who she is. Lucinda looks at Errol with concern and a reassuring smile. Alexander is interested in finding out the identity of the stranger. Lucinda explains that she is Mrs. Ricardo, one of the late Emperor Lloyd's teachers. Lucinda's words cause a shock to those present, and everyone listens intently. Lucinda continues, revealing that Mrs. Ricardo was the previous emperor's mistress, and in order to stay in the palace, she approached Emperor Lloyd. This information causes even more bewilderment among the guests, and they look around. Errol hears the conversation and begins to interject Ricardo's name, trying to figure out if she is related to Sika Ricardo. Her large eyes glisten with curiosity and confusion as she tries to put the puzzle together in her head. Errol recalls with dismay that Ricardo is Sika's mother. From the way she treats the small child, Errol thinks she is unworthy of being a good person. The girl hugs Lucinda tightly, seeking her protection and comfort. Errol asks with interest how Sika is doing. Alexander reassures her, but the girl cannot get rid of the feeling of anxiety. It is important to her to know that her friend is safe. She continues to ask questions. Suddenly, Raffaello appears, congratulating Princess Errol. The girl is surprised by his appearance and feels joy. His presence makes her feel safe and hopeful, and she smiles back. Errol is surprised to see Raffaello, whom she has not seen for a long time. He smiles, pleased that she remembers him. Their meeting is filled with warmth and joy. Errol feels protected. Errol looks to Tessa for support, but he suddenly disappears. She thinks he'd better get in the way of the whole situation, and sighs in relief when Raffaello is by her side again. His smile gives her confidence. Errol, the little princess with the golden hair, suddenly learns that Raffaello has a grandson. She was shocked and wondered if she could get along with such a relative, given Raffaello's difficult character. Raffaello hoped that Errol would find common ground with his grandson, Leon. Despite this, Errol felt some anxiety and insecurity. Leon, Alexander's son, greeted Errol with a humble, "Greetings." His blue eyes shone with friendliness, and he immediately made a good impression on Errol. Errol and Leon quickly became best friends, despite their initial doubts. Errol was glad that she had found in Leon a true friend and a sweet ally in her new surroundings. Once, during one of their meetings, Errol was a little scared, but Leon supported her, which strengthened their friendship. Raffaello was pleased that his grandson took a liking to the princess, and they became inseparable. Meanwhile, Mrs. Ricardo and her friend were discussing Errol. They didn't understand why she stood out so much, but they couldn't deny her influence and charisma. Errol looked gorgeous in her red dress, which was the envy of those around her. Her looks and confidence attracted attention and sparked discussions behind her back. Mrs. Ricardo couldn't get over how Tessa had dared to insult her. She pondered her actions and planned how to cement her place in society. Mrs. Ricardo regretted her neglect of Thesa, for if she had known that Lloyd would die so quickly, she would not have acted this way. Now she feared that Tessa would never forgive her. Mrs. Ricardo felt vulnerable trying to cement her place in society, especially with a small child in her arms. In her despair, she even thought that her life would be easier without the child. Sika, holding the hand of her mother, Mrs. Ricardo, anxiously asks where they are. She is in a gorgeous red dress, leading him to an unknown place shrouded in light, causing him to feel uneasy. 2. Mrs. Ricardo recalls in her mind how she believed the Emperor's promises that he would marry her. Her eyes flicker with images of past memories where she, dressed in her wedding dress, was on the threshold of a new future. The boy looks anxiously at his mother while she holds his hand and thinks that it would have been better if Sika had been the Emperor's child. These thoughts leave a heavy residue in her heart. In the hall with the glowing lights, Mrs. Ricardo sits down in front of Sika and asks him if she has been a bad mother to him all this time. Her words reflect an inner struggle and doubt. As she reflects on her past, she admits that she has lost a lot because of Sika's birth. Her words are filled with bitterness, and she hopes for understanding from her son, seeing him as the meaning of her life. In response to all of his mother's musings, Sika finds no words of comfort. His red eyes are full of pain and bewilderment, and her words about his uselessness cut his heart like a knife. His mother, looking at her elegant shoes, says that all Sika can do for her is to disappear. These words sound like a sentence that crushes the boy's last hopes. Sika, desperate, rushes to his mother, begging her to stay. His cry is full of fear and despair. He's willing to do anything to earn her love and forgiveness. The boy, in tears, begs his mother not to leave, promising to be an obedient and good child. His pleas are filled with fear of loneliness and a desire to right his wrongs. Mrs. Ricardo, however, walks off into the light without turning around, leaving Sika behind. Her final word goodbye becomes his inevitable end, plunging him into an abyss of loneliness and loss. Errol is proud that Count Marlin's second son, Baron Finn Young-Sik, and Baron Pietro couldn't take their eyes off her mother, Lucinda. The thought makes her unconcealed joy and pride in her family. She laughs out loud, thinking this is great news. Meanwhile, Alexander and Fenrir observe her behavior with bewilderment and slight confusion, trying to figure out what makes the little princess so amused. Alexander notes that Errol has been laughing since yesterday. He is pleased at her good mood, but Fenrir remarks that such laughter is not befitting royalty, which causes them concern. Errol suddenly cries out, drawing Alexander and Fenrir's attention. She, gasping a little with laughter, tries to explain her joy, and Alexander looks at her with a slight smile, not fully understanding what is going on. Errol demands chocolate from Alexander, saying that she needs to pay Booba. Alexander laughs and tries to explain that it's not quite right, but Errol insists on repeating her demands. Fenrir asks Alexander if he has any chocolate on him. Alexander embarrassedly replies that he doesn't have any, which further amuses Errol, who continues her attempts to get what she wants. Fenrir decides it's time to read Errol a story, but the little princess resolutely refuses, stating that she doesn't want it. Alexander observes this scene with mild surprise. Alexander tries to understand why Errol is so averse to reading books. Errol stubbornly repeats that she doesn't want to and won't do it, which leaves him perplexed and slightly sad. Fenrir wonders if it wouldn't be better if Errol had a peer friend. Errol listens to the idea thoughtfully, unsure of her feelings on the matter. Fenrir doesn't think that Errol is old enough to socialize with her peers, but still thinks it would be helpful to show the princess how other children live so she can learn from them. Lucinda looked at Tessu holding a toy bear and explained to him how to hold it properly. She seemed full of enthusiasm and joy, showing him how to take care of the soft toy as if it were a baby. Tessa struggled to understand Lucinda's instructions, feeling slightly confused. His careful movements and focused gaze showed how serious he was about the task, even though it was just a stuffed toy. When Taysa finally figured out how to hold the bear, Lucinda nodded approvingly, clapping her hands with joy. Her eyes glowed with pride and happiness for Taysa, who was now successful. Taysa was not happy with his work, but his slightly haughty expression betrayed a certain inner satisfaction. Lucinda, noticing this, noted with admiration and a slight sneer how proud he was of himself. Lucinda thought about how she had feared for Tessu at first, but now she saw how hard he was working when it came to Errol. Her thoughts were filled with tenderness and gratitude for his efforts. She realized that Taysa wasn't all bad. His sincere attempts to take care of the bear cub showed his true nature, and it made her respect and sympathize with him even more. Taysa, trying to do the right thing, tried to feed the bear cub, but his movements were awkward. Lucinda only smiled sweetly as she watched, realizing how hard it was for him to get used to this role. She was startled when she saw Tessa awkwardly holding the bottle. Although he was trying to do the right thing, his efforts looked a little funny and touching at the same time. When a knock sounded in the palace, Lucinda and Taysa looked around. Taysa was holding the bear cub, and Lucinda was anxiously waiting to see who was coming in. At that moment, the atmosphere changed, becoming more tense. Opening the door, a courtier in dress uniform entered. He looked worried and immediately asked what was going on. This added to the mystery and anticipation of the next development, leaving intrigue. Mrs. Ricardo requests an audience with Taysa, and he decides to refuse her. He has a look of unyielding determination on his face as he denies the request, ignoring her possible arguments and reasoning. Lucinda, who is next to Tessa, informs him that Mrs. Ricardo claims that she has one last thing to say. She assures Taysa that if he listens to her, she will voluntarily leave the palace. Mrs. Ricardo, with grief on her face, cries out to Thesu, telling him that her son is dead. Her words are full of pain and despair, hoping to reach his heart. She continues her monologue, explaining that now that the late emperor's son is gone, she has no reason to stay. Her voice shakes with emotion as she speaks of her loss. Tessa, trying to comprehend what she has heard, wonders who will now take care of him in the future. His face reflects worry and confusion. Lucinda, also stunned, asks if the late emperor's son is really dead. She is shocked at what she has heard and cannot believe it. Taysa, in response to Mrs. Ricardo's accusations, declares that his brother's generosity was not love. He threatens her, demanding that she dare not say that it was his son. Mrs. Ricardo tries to justify herself by saying that she was only stating the fact that her son was dead. She does not understand why Taysa continues to treat her so cruelly. Tessa, not believing her words, says that she couldn't bribe him even if she tried. His gaze is full of contempt and distrust of her intentions. Mrs. Ricardo, realizing that her words will not resonate, decides to leave the palace. She says that if she cannot become the emperor's mistress, there is no point in staying, and that the gossip and memories of her son will torment her. Mrs. Ricardo begged for money to remarry despite the death of her son. She stood sorrowfully with her head down, her words filled with bitterness and hope for a new life. Lucinda was shocked by Mrs. Ricardo's request. She couldn't believe that she wanted to marry again after the recent loss of her son. Lucinda asked when Mrs. Ricardo would leave, and she replied that she would as soon as she received the necessary amount of money. Tessa promised to inform the adjutant of the situation, much to the surprise of Mrs. Ricardo, who respectfully addressed him as Majesty. Tessa was determined to deal with the matter. Mrs. Ricardo tried to assure Tessa that it was not too late to make a change. She tried to find support and understanding in his eyes, but Tessa was adamant his decision was firm. Suddenly, a white fox with many tails appeared, causing confusion to everyone present. Mrs. Ricardo was apparently ready to use any opportunity to achieve her goals, turning to Your Majesty with renewed hope. Tessa stated emphatically that he had not one single reason to show mercy to Mrs. Ricardo. His eyes glittered with anger. He was sure he was right, and prepared to act on his convictions. Lucinda, holding little Errol in her arms, tried not to interfere in this conflict. She tried to calm the little girl who, despite the seriousness of the situation, was uttering her childish words, "Aboo-boo." Errol was alive and alert, but still a toddler. She rejoiced at the closeness of her favorite aunt and, despite everything that was happening, felt safe in her arms. Lucinda, smiling, noticed that Errol was pretending to be asleep but was actually listening to stories. This little trickery brought a smile to her face, and she enjoyed the moments with her niece. Life in the palace continued, full of challenges and joys. But together, Lucinda and Errol found comfort and support in each other, coping with any difficulties that came their way. Errol, the little princess with golden hair, happily hugs Lucinda, her aunt. In response to Lucinda's question, Errol confirms that she missed her, which makes Lucinda smile and warm her heart. Lucinda tells Errol that she returned right after her audience with the king. Errol is surprised and asks who exactly Lucinda was with. Lucinda replies evasively that she shouldn't worry. Errol remembers how Tessa was constantly pestering her and mentally asks Lucinda not to let it continue. She is worried for her safety and the safety of her aunt. Errol expresses her concern and worry that Tessa may have been bothering Lucinda. Lucinda reassures her by saying that meeting the king was fun and enjoyable. Errol is still concerned and asks if Papa was bad. Lucinda assures her that everything is fine and that the king is a good man. Errol calms down but remains wary of the situation. Lucinda explains that the king is a good man and they were just having tea. Errol worries about the possible poison in the tea and demands an explanation. Lucinda again assures her that everything is fine. Lucinda tells Errol that the king wants to get closer to her. Errol thinks about it and begins to realize that maybe the king really isn't that bad. A maid enters the room and calls Lucinda in. Errol and Lucinda turn around and wait to see what the maid has to say, preparing for more news. Errol decides that she cannot let all events unfold as they did in the novel she read. She decides to act to protect her family and change the outcome of events. Errol mentally promises herself that she will fight for her safety and Lucinda's safety despite all the difficulties and obstacles they may face in the future. Errol, a little princess with golden hair, talks to her familiar, a cat with wings named Boo Boo. He is fascinated by what he sees and tries to share it with Errol, but she, tired, shows no interest and asks him to leave her alone, assuring him that she doesn't care about him right now. Boo Boo, not giving up, tells her how he hasn't seen such pure fear in a long time, that his heart even beat faster. Errol, sitting on the bed, perplexed, asks what he's talking about, trying to understand the reason for his excitement. Boo Boo cheerfully clarifies that he is talking about the man that Errol once gave chocolate to. Errol begins to realize who he's talking about, and her expression changes from surprise to concern. Boo Boo continues, explaining that that person is now locked in the basement and is in tears. Errol is shocked and wonders how long this has been going on, not believing the cruelty of what is happening. Boo Boo replies that this has been going on for a long time and the man is close to death, so he has even stopped crying. Errol is stunned and can't believe her ears, her eyes filling with tears. Boo Boo, enjoying the drama, adds that the man is so desperate that this is fun for him. Errol is horrified by such cruelty, her heart shrinking with pity and fear. At that moment, Alexander and Lucinda burst into the room, disturbed by Errol's screams. Alexander calls for the princess, and Lucinda asks what is wrong, her face expressing alarm and concern. Errol, crying, complains that Boo Boo is a bad cat. Lucinda looks at Errol in surprise, not understanding what is going on, and tries to comfort the girl. Errol, sobbing, explains to Lucinda that she likes Sika. Lucinda hugs her, trying to comfort her and understand what Sika means, her voice full of tenderness. A tranquil scene with the palace and trees, concluding the emotionally intense story of Errol, her experiences, and the events of the day. A boy with brown hair, Sika, sits in a dark room and asks himself how long he has been here. He feels fear and loneliness as he tries to figure out why he is in this place and how long he has to stay here. Eventually, he realizes that he has been sitting here for a very long time. Sika begins to feel very hungry and thirsty, his body weakened. The boy does not realize how long he will be able to endure in such conditions. His thoughts become increasingly gloomy. Sika begins to wonder if his mother has left him here forever. He finds it hard to believe that his mother could have done such a thing, but in his despair he finds no other explanation. His fears intensify, and he feels abandoned and forgotten. He comes to the conclusion that he will probably die here. It seems to the boy that there is no way out, and this place will be his final resting place. His eyes fill with tears, and he feels hope leaving him. Sika regrets running away. He thinks about the fact that if he had known he would never see his family again, he would not have run away. His soul is torn by the pain of realizing his mistakes and his inability to undo them. The image of a girl with golden hair appears in his memories. This girl was very dear to him, and the thought of her helps him to hold on. He remembers her kindness and care, which gives him some comfort. Sika notices something unusual on the floor. He thinks that perhaps it is a passageway. His heart fills with hope, and he begins to scrutinize the place, hoping to find a way to freedom. He remembers the words about the princess's divine beast and begins to believe that the princess might have been right. His faith in salvation is rekindled, and he begins to search for a way out with renewed vigor. Sika hears a voice that seems familiar to him. He can't believe his ears, but his heart tells him it's Errol, the girl with golden hair. Her voice becomes a guiding star for him. Errol does indeed appear in front of him. Sika finally feels relief and joy. The girl smiles at him, and he realizes that his nightmare is over. She has come for him, and now he knows everything will be okay. In the castle hallway, Errol and Alexander turn around startled when Fenrir bursts in and yells at them. Errol is holding an infant, and Alexander is carrying little Sick in his arms. Fenrir's questions clearly demand an immediate explanation. Fenrir sternly demands an explanation of where they went without saying a word. Alexander calmly replies that he has business to do quietly. Tension is building in the air, but Alexander is confident in his actions. Fenrir yells in bewilderment and anger that they have turned the entire palace upside down. She cannot understand how this is possible and demands an explanation. At the time, little Sika is sleeping in Alexander's arms, unresponsive to the noise. Fenrir tries to chase them away, but Errol with the baby in her arms and Alexander and Sika insist on their own. They say they did everything quietly as they planned. The situation is escalating, but they are sure they are right. Sika lies on the bed, unconscious. Errol is relieved to note that he has only passed out. They can calm down a bit now, but the question of what happened to him still remains. Alexander assumes that Sika fell asleep from overexertion when the tension subsided. Errol wonders how such a small boy could have ended up in such a dangerous place. The answer to that question will not be easy. Errol ponders the fact that if they hadn't found Sika, he might have died. The thought is frightening and makes you think about how important it was to get to his aid in time. They saved him, but what was the price for that? Fenrir recognizes Sika and asks if he is Mrs. Ricardo's son. Errol and Alexander are surprised, for everyone thought Mrs. Ricardo's son was dead. This news shocks everyone, and they realize that the situation is more complicated than it seemed. Errol confirms that she heard the same thing. Mrs. Ricardo's son is dead. But now they see a live boy, and it calls into question everything they knew up to that point. The mystery becomes more and more confusing. Alexander reveals that Mrs. Ricardo abandoned Sick. He shares his personal story of how he himself was kept in a similar place for 4 days. A child like Sika could have died if they hadn't come to help. Errol held her doll in her hands, sadly realizing how hard it was to relive what had happened. Fenrir noted with indignation how dishonorable a woman Sika's mother had been, leaving him in such a state. Errol and Fenrir discussed Siki's predicament. Fenrir reminded them that they couldn't hide him in the princess palace forever. Errol begged to at least wait until the boy recovered, otherwise sending him to his mother could only make the situation worse. Errol realized that if nothing was changed, Sika would definitely die. Her eyes filled with tears at the realization of hopelessness. Errol was desperate, not knowing what to do. She cried as she held Sika close to her and exclaimed why on earth he was being treated like this. Fenrir assured her that it wouldn't last long, trying to calm the princess. Alexander, Errol's guard, offered to stand guard at the door just in case. His confidence and calmness calmed the tense atmosphere a bit. Errol worried about Alexander, asking if he could handle it, since even he needed rest. Alexander assured her that it wouldn't be a problem, even if he had to stay awake all week. Alexander looked determined, saying that he could handle any difficulty. Errol noticed him glowing with confidence and strength. Errol needed rest too. She held Sika in her arms, seeing him finally fall asleep, and hoped things would get better. Fenrir turned to Sika, who lay quietly. She asked if he wanted to stay with Errol, hoping that the boy would find comfort and safety around the princess. Princess Errol, Amelia, happily informs her that she is very fond of Sika. Her eyes light up with happiness when she says this, and she seems to have found a friend in him. Lucinda hugs Errol gently, noting how much she has grown. Errol is surprised, as she hadn't noticed her changes. Lucinda says she is proud of her. Lucinda admires Errol's ability to give her love to others. She thinks it is a sign that Errol has become more mature and grown up, despite her young age. Sika wakes up and smells milk. This awakens him and he begins to search for the source of the odor. He finds that the smell brings soothing and comfort. Sika notices Errol, who is also awake and is happy that he is finally up. She calls his name, getting his attention, and her face lights up with happiness. Errol, with shining eyes, asks Sika if he is awake. She seems very excited and happy, as if this is the beginning of a new exciting day. Lucinda explains that this is Errol's room, and she is her Aunt Lucinda. Sika looks a little confused and puzzled, but Lucinda reassures him with her smile. Sika asks if this is really Errol's room, and his voice is full of bewilderment. Lucinda smiles and confirms it, adding that he is safe here. Lucinda caringly wonders if Sika is hungry and if he would like to eat. Her smile reassures him, and he begins to feel at home. Lucinda decides that oatmeal would be a good choice for Sika's breakfast, who is still weak from his illness. Errol, for his part, strongly disagrees with her choice, expressing his displeasure. Alexander, holding the papers in his hands, ponders whether everything will end up as he plans. He walks through the luxurious hall, immersed in his thoughts, which gives the scene an atmosphere of anxiety and expectation. With a quiet knock, the door opens and Alexander walks into the room. He greets everyone with a smile, asking if they are awake. His friendliness and calmness create a feeling of coziness and security. The room has a cozy atmosphere. Little Errol with golden hair reacts happily to Alexander's appearance. He wonders if she's going to meet her friend, which makes the girl laugh. Sika, watching, ponders why Alexander is being so formal with the child. He finds it strange, but Errol seems to like this style of communication, which adds a comical touch to the scene. Alexander confesses that he wanted to ask an important question yesterday. Sika is perplexed and asks who he is, to which Alexander, remaining calm, explains his role as a knight escorting Princess Amelia. Sika is shocked to realize that the little Errol he has been chatting with is Princess Amelia. This unexpected information surprises him greatly, and he cannot hide his confusion. Sika, stunned by what he has heard, repeats the words about the princess, not believing that the child he has been communicating with is really a princess. His thoughts are confused, and he cannot cope with this discovery. Lucinda, noticing Sika's condition, carefully tells him not to get up so abruptly, pointing out his weak state. Alexander holds Errol in his arms, and Lucinda insistently asks Sika to sit down to rest. The thought flashes through Sika's mind that his mother hates him, but after all, Errol saved him. He struggles with conflicting emotions, feeling both gratitude and despair at the same time. Errol, watching the scene, tells Sika with a smile that he is still the same. This phrase of hers gives the scene a note of warmth and friendliness, despite all the worries of the characters. Lucinda knelt down in front of Sika and told him with a soft smile that he was still very young. He looked at her in surprise, not understanding what she meant. Lucinda continued, explaining to Sika that if he didn't like being small, he should eat right and grow up healthy. Her words sounded like good advice, full of care and tenderness. At that moment, Alexander appeared, holding the infant in his arms. He respectfully noted that Lucinda's words, as always, were full of wisdom, and called her the most influential person. His appearance added a bit of tension to the scene. Errol, holding the infant, was surprised that Lucinda had recently left the palace. She couldn't believe that her aunt had remarried, expressing her concern. Alexander, noticing Errol's concern, noted that Duke Joseph would not hold the baby, as he had a reliable successor. That news reassured the princess a little. Lucinda explained that she could not guarantee that Duke Joseph would be kind to the child, as even his mother had not shown much concern for him. This made everyone wonder about the child's future. Alexander emphasized that the emperor would not like it. He remembered how after the previous emperor died, Mrs. Ricardo had made a fuss claiming that the child was his heir. Errol thought about how much pain that child had to endure. Her heart squeezed with pity, and she felt a great responsibility for his fate. Alexander, seeing Errol's sadness, said she was strange, questioning why she was thinking about others when she should be worrying about herself. Errol looked at him confused, not knowing what to answer. Alexander, trying to be supportive, leaned toward her and quietly asked her why she always thought of others when she needed to take care of herself. His words made Errol think about her priorities. The golden-haired Errol looks on with wonder and concern. She can't understand why everyone around her is so kind to her. Her Aunt Lucinda holds her tight, and her guard, Alexander, explains that Lucinda has always been a very kind woman. Lucinda thanks Alexander for his kind words. At this time, a boy with brown hair, Sika, looks at them and expresses his gratitude for Lucinda's kindness. Lucinda responds to his gratitude with a smile. Alexander, looking thoughtfully away, says that there is only one solution in any case. His gaze is serious, and he is apparently pondering some important problem. He doesn't want Lucinda to worry. Errol asks curiously what that solution is. Her eyes are full of questions, and she waits for an answer. While Alexander continues to ponder, she holds Sika's hand as if looking for support. Alexander stares out the window, reflecting on Errol's life. He realizes that despite her youth and charm, she has grown up quite unhappy. Her words always make him smile and want to protect her. Suddenly, Alexander opens the curtains, illuminating the room with light. He asks Errol what she's going to do next. He wants her to make an important decision on her own instead of relying on others. Sika, sitting on the bed, asks if he can become a knight if he follows Alexander. His eyes are full of hope and determination. He wants to prove his loyalty and strength. Alexander assures Siku that everything depends on himself, but promises to be his mentor. His words are full of confidence and support, showing that he believes in Sika's potential. Sika looks up and asks if he will be able to see Errol if he becomes a knight. His words are full of longing and desire to be near those he cares about. Alexander explains to Sika how much effort it would take for an ordinary orphan to be able to see the princess. His voice is full of seriousness, showing that the journey will be difficult but possible. A boy with brown hair named Sika looks determined. He declares that he will follow someone he is determined to follow. His eyes are full of determination, and he clenches his hand, preparing for action. Raffaello, the white-haired warlord, reflects on the fact that people who have gone far ahead don't always get what they want. But he's not going to waste time thinking about it, preferring to act. Raffaello calls someone a chump, sitting in his chair and smiling with a sly expression. His thoughts are full of contempt for this person, but he hides it behind an outward smile. He reflects on the fact that despite his different desires with Lloyd, he has never disliked him. I wonder what would have changed if Lloyd had lived a little longer. Raffaello cuts short his musings, realizing their futility. He is suddenly distracted by a voice calling him Grandpa. He looks up and sees little Leon in front of him. Leon happily runs to Raffaello, who answers him with a smile and calls him by name. Their meeting is full of warmth and sincere joy. Raffaello, holding Leon in his arms, asks who the little charmer is. Leon smiles and looks at him with adoration. Their bond seems especially strong and touching. Raffaello is visited by his daughter with Leon, explaining that Alexander has brought a child, and she is looking for people to look after him. Raffaello listens to her with interest. The daughter tells Raffaello that Leon is Mrs. Ricardo's son. She doesn't know all the details, but she has heard that there is something important connected to him. Raffaello learns that Leon has taken a liking to the princess and he needs to hurry and join the palace. His daughter is sure that everything will be fine, even if Leon fails to win the princess's favor. Raffaello, a wise warlord, prepares a contingency plan. His daughter admires his ability to envision the future several steps ahead, though sometimes it seems he is not there. Raffaello expresses annoyance at the rumors of his death, which perplexes his daughter. She asks him what he means, but he only continues to mutter, resentful of the situation. Raffaello reminds his daughter that Princess Errol is no ordinary child. He emphasizes the importance of strict supervision and nurturing so that she grows up strong and smart. Raffaello's daughter is instructed to tell Alexander to never show weakness. She nods, accepting the instruction, realizing the gravity of the situation. The blue-haired woman is worried about her father, who has not even inquired how he is doing. This worry reflects the tension in their relationship and the misunderstanding between them. Sika sends Leon forward, realizing how hard it will be for Princess Errol to part ways with him. He tries to explain his decision to make the parting less painful for the princess. Errol is angry at Sika for his decision. She expresses her displeasure by saying that it is up to her to decide whether she is sad or not. Sika is surprised and upset that his gesture was not appreciated. Lucinda tries to reassure Errol, explaining that Alexander's decision was difficult but necessary. She affectionately coaxes her not to be angry, cradling the little princess in her arms. Lucinda thanks Alexander for his help, recognizing that without his support, they would have had a hard time handling the situation. Alexander replies that he is always happy to help, showing his loyalty. Sika feels hurt and misunderstood. He thinks about how cruel it was to not let him say goodbye to Leon, even though the princess doesn't love him. His sadness intensifies, and he walks away, leaving Errol to ponder his behavior. Errol is with Lucinda and Alexander discussing the possible consequences of their return home. Lucinda worries that they will be reprimanded, and Alexander may find himself in an unfavorable position before the emperor. Alexander is surprised that Lucinda is worried about him in this situation. It dawns on him to realize that someone is showing concern for him. Errol suddenly enters the conversation with an unusual statement, expressing his support and benevolence. Alexander is amazed at the wisdom of the little princess. Alexander admits that Errol sometimes seems more mature than he is. Lucinda agrees, noting how quickly her social skills and benevolent facial expressions are developing. Alexander, reflecting, begins to tell Lucinda a funny story he recently heard. She wonders if the story is related to their marriage. Lucinda is shocked by what she hears, trying to figure out where these rumors about marriage came from. Errol, holding her hand, also reacts to what she has heard with surprise. Alexander explains that rumors spread quickly in the palace. Lucinda, holding her head, can't understand how this happened. Lucinda brings a huge stack of letters and reports to show Alexander. He is surprised at the amount of papers to be sorted through. Alexander agrees that the papers need to be sorted through. He notices that Errol is tired and suggests that they take a break so everyone can rest. Alexander points out that some of the papers can be thrown away right away. Lucinda begins sorting through them, sighing in relief that at least some of the work can be finished quickly. Alexander is blue-haired and concerned for Errol's safety. He discusses with Lucinda who the princess can keep in touch with. Lucinda agrees, realizing that they need to be careful. She notices that Alexander is acting like a caring dad, which makes them both smile. Alexander holds up an envelope with an important message. He emphasizes that the princess cannot date just anyone. Lucinda agrees, reflecting on the seriousness of the situation. Alexander continues to explain his concerns, showing the envelope with the wax seal. Alexander reasons that if one is so careful in choosing people, there is only one worthy candidate left. Lucinda nods in agreement, realizing that they must act prudently for the safety of Errol. At this time, the princess stands aside, listening to them intently. Alexander asks Lucinda for permission to look at the letter. He opens the envelope and reads it, realizing the importance of the information it contains. Errol looks at it with hope and trust, realizing that Alexander and Lucinda care about her. Alexander informs her that the letter was sent by the Earl of Marland's second son, who works full-time as an instructor at the academy. Lucinda and Errol listen intently as they stand next to him in the posh office. Lucinda adds that the man is rather reserved and prefers to spend time in his lab. She goes on to discuss his characteristics, emphasizing that the choice of people to talk to Errol should be cautious and well considered. A young man with bright blue hair, Alexander, reflects that Miss Lucinda cannot be alone forever. He believes that if she becomes part of a noble family, it will be a great help to the princess. From his point of view, the Earl of Marland is a good option. Lucinda, a woman with golden hair, confesses with embarrassment that she is not yet ready for such a change in her life. Her indecision elicits sympathy and understanding from those around her, but the question of the future remains. The little girl with golden hair, Errol, emotionally declares that she wants to live happily with Lucinda and will not accept any other options. Her determination elicits laughter and applause from those present. Errol is perplexed as to what an Errol is. Lucinda explains to her that her aunt must live her own life and make choices that will bring her happiness. Errol resists, not understanding the complexity of the situation. Lucinda, smiling, asks Errol if she wants Auntie to get married. Errol replies that he wants Lucinda to find her happiness, but doesn't want it to mean separating from her. Their conversation is filled with warmth and concern for each other. Lucinda explains to Errol that she wants to live with her until she is an adult and has children. Errol insists that even then it is unacceptable. Their conversation continues in a warm and trusting atmosphere. Suddenly, Alexander interrupts their conversation, reminding them that it is time to act. He asks Sir Alexander to take care of Lucinda and promises to return soon. Errol, confused and excited, doesn't realize where he is going. Errol is sad, wishing she could add a couple years to her age to better communicate her wishes to Lucinda. She feels helpless and dreams of a future where she can be more persuasive. Alexander asks in puzzlement if the princess really wants Miss Lucinda to meet this man. Errol, despite her small strength, expresses her support and hope for a better future. Alexander, seeing Errol's determination, promises to help her. Errol joyfully hugs him, expressing her gratitude and hope that all will be well. Their interaction is filled with warmth and understanding, creating a touching atmosphere. One day, Errol, the little princess with golden hair, ran into Alexander, the guard with blue hair, and asked if he would really help her. In response, she couldn't understand what he was really up to. Alexander, holding Errol in his arms, explained that he didn't like Miss Lucinda. When asked by Errol who he did like, he replied that he didn't like anyone. Errol reflected on the fact that Alexander had always said that he had never liked anyone. She wondered if that was the phrase of a typical popular guy and asked if that meant that he was popular. Alexander suddenly admitted that he liked the princess and that he was willing to do whatever she wanted. Errol was taken aback by such a statement and felt special. Errol was surprised and asked Alexander why he had that look on his face. He calmly explained to her that he was just contemplating. The princess wondered if he was affected by her finding out how he felt. He replied that he was just seemingly detached, but he was actually sincere. Alexander explained to Errol that he was on good terms with that man and would try to contact him. If that person was also interested, he would do his best to get them to meet. Errol showed interest in whether or not Miss Lucinda would leave the palace, leaving her behind. She felt excitement and curiosity about this change. Errol heard Alexander tell her a secret and was surprised to ask him what he said. He replied with a smile that it was a secret. Errol realized that Miss Lucinda was already highly popular and that everyone at the castle admired her. At the castle, Lucinda was very popular with the men. They often confessed their love to her, among them valets and knights. Each sought to attract her attention by proposing marriage or inviting her to join different societies. Lucinda walked down the corridor holding little Errol in her arms. Despite the numerous proposals and advances, she remained calm and took her time choosing. Her popularity among the castle's residents was growing day by day. At another meeting in the palace, Earl Merle's second son, Mel, appears. He was a kind and gentle man. Lucinda couldn't help but notice his attention and care. Mel plucked up courage and wrote a letter to Lucinda. It was not easy for him to do so, but his feelings were sincere. He was seriously interested in Lucinda and hoped for reciprocity. Mel looked very excited as he handed the letter to Lucinda. He was full of hope and expectation that she would accept his sincere acceptance. They had flowers around them to symbolize his warm feelings. Lucinda, reading the letter, was deeply touched. She wondered about Mel's feelings and his sincerity. It was hard for her to make a decision, but she realized how important it was for both of them. Meanwhile, little Errol with golden hair, holding a doll, watched her aunt. She admired Lucinda and wondered why so many people were trying to pay attention to her. One of Lucinda's admirers brought her cookies from the best bakery. He had been standing in line since morning to give her something special. The gesture was an expression of his deep respect and sympathy. The man with glasses approached Lucinda, wanting to tell her something important. His words were full of hope and expectation that he could get her attention and express his feelings. Errol, holding the doll, was amazed at how popular her aunt was. Even small children admired Lucinda. Errol felt that Lucinda was really special and worthy of admiration. Amelia, who looks after Princess Errol, complains that she has little free time because of this. Despite the difficulties, she continues to fulfill her duties with joy. Little Errol is surrounded by many gifts. She hugs them fondly, and Amelia assures that everything that has been presented will be delivered to the princess safely. Errol looks at the unusual winged cat, Boo Boo, with amazement. The cat explains that Errol shouldn't be surprised, as she herself is very cute and attracts such attention. Fenrir, a strict and caring servant, warns Errol that prolonged contact with the pacifier could damage her teeth. Errol stubbornly resists, unwilling to part with her favorite pacifier. Fenrir notices that the princess does not like the way she reads books to her and decides to hire a teacher to tutor Errol. She is sure it will help the little princess. Errol learns that from now on, she will be taught by an outstanding teacher. At first, she is not happy, thinking that her job is only to sleep and eat, but then she agrees that teaching is not so bad. Fenrir introduces Errol to her new teacher, Baron Pietro. The little princess is surprised and a little puzzled by this choice, but is ready to learn what this new phase will bring. At that moment, her Uncle Thesa appears, saying that it's all really fun and interesting. Errol happily greets him, feeling safe in his presence. Lucinda, Errol's aunt, suggests using gestures instead of words, explaining that it will be easier and clearer. Errol listens to her advice with curiosity, trying out a new way of communicating. Errol, thinking about gestures, comes to the conclusion that it is really unusual and interesting. She decides to try using them in communication with others to better understand and express her feelings. Lucinda is amused when she sees Tesu, but he wonders if he is acting right. She is filled with doubt, wondering if the confession will not happen again tonight, which adds a note of sadness to the moment. Tessa notices that Lucinda is not in a good mood today. He tries to figure out the reason for her mood, asking questions and showing his concern, which emphasizes their emotional connection. Tessa wonders if Lucinda is tired of taking care of Errol. She replies quickly and firmly that she is not, but her tension is obvious, which makes one wonder about her inner state. Lucinda talks about how cute Errol is growing up. Even though she sees her every day, she still can't believe how fast she's growing up, which makes her cringe in awe. Tessa adds that Lucinda has no idea how adorable Errol is when she's playing with her pacifier. Lucinda regrets not knowing this sooner and feels that she could have taken better care of her. Lucinda realizes that she has talked too long without stopping. This shows her anxiety and worries about Errol's future, making the moment more personal and emotional. Tessa notices that Lucinda is worried about Errol and respects her for it. He ponders if she knows how much he appreciates her concern, which adds depth to their relationship. Lucinda is a little confused when Tessa asks if she wants something from him. She thinks she's happy and sees no reason to ask for anything else, which makes their interaction sincere and touching. Tessa clarifies that he's not about that, showing his concern and willingness to support her in any situation, which builds their trust and rapport. Lucinda and Tessa realize how important they are to each other and to Ariel. Their conversation emphasizes the deep care and support they are willing to give each other, making their relationship even stronger and warmer. Tessa, looking directly into Lucinda's eyes, says that she spares no time for him and wants to repay him for it. Lucinda embarrassedly replies that she is not worthy of such words. Tessa insists that Lucinda just answer his question. She hesitates and feels even more awkward, not knowing what to answer. Tessa asks if Lucinda wants anything. Lucinda looks stunned and repeats his question to herself, trying to conceptualize what she could possibly want. Lucinda timidly asks Tessa to teach her to read and write. This statement surprises Tessa, and he stares at her as if he can't believe his ears. And Tessa, on reflection, asks Lucinda if she can't read and write. Lucinda, embarrassed, explains that she hasn't had a chance to learn since she's been busy learning etiquette and taking care of Errol. Lucinda blushes and apologizes, saying that she misspoke and apologizes. She feels embarrassed and explains that she's been thinking too much about. Tessa, lying on the chair, thinks about how all of this reminds him of Errol. He reassures Lucinda, telling her that everything is fine. Tessa says goodbye to Lucinda, promising to see her next time. Lucinda is nervous and hurries to confirm that she understood what he said. Tessa looks at Lucinda and thinks to himself that she doesn't understand anything. He decides it would be best to educate her. Tessa decides that he only wants to hear from Lucinda about Errol, but also realizes that teaching her to read and write would be a good idea. Errol stood in the bright sunlight and her golden hair glistened. She reassured her Aunt Lucinda, assuring her that everything was fine and not to worry. Lucinda, despite her seriousness, smiled in relief. A shout rang out in front of the palace and the training session began. All around was a verdant riot of nature, creating a contrast to the white walls and majestic columns of the building. Alexander, Errol's loyal guard, was at the center of the action. Inside the hall, two men with wooden swords fought, honing their skills. Alexander was focused and confident, showing off his strength and skills. His movements were precise and quick. Lucinda, accompanied by two maids, watched over Errol, who looked contented in her carriage. They offered the princess a rest, but she was full of energy and eager to watch the training. Alexander stepped closer, asking why they were still here. Errol happily called him Mommy, which brought a smile to everyone's faces. Errol continued to follow the events with curiosity. Alexander, having finished his workout, picked up the towel Lucinda handed him. They exchanged smiles, realizing that today's workout had been particularly productive and intense. Errol was fascinated by Alexander and wondered how long he usually worked out. Alexander replied that it was about 4 hours, which surprised Errol because that meant little time to sleep. Alexander assured her that if she became like him, she wouldn't lack sleep. His confidence inspired Errol, and she thought about her future workouts. Errol, looking at Alexander, who took care of her, decided that she needed to grow up a little and become stronger like her aunt and uncle. She felt safe under their protection and guidance. Errol felt it was her time to learn, but excitement gripped her and she was a little scared, asking to take her time. Her determination remained strong despite temporary doubts. Baron Pietro, an elegant young man with green hair, greets Princess Errol and announces that he will take charge of her education. He gives the impression of a well-mannered and caring teacher, ready to devote his time and effort to the young princess. Lucinda, a woman with golden hair, is in charge of caring for the princess. She greets Pietro, recalling his past appearance and expressing admiration for his looks. The little Princess Errol in her arms babbles happily. Pietro politely takes Lucinda's hand, expressing respect and joy at seeing her. This gesture emphasizes their long friendship and mutual respect, creating an atmosphere of warmth and trust between them. Pietro gently kisses Lucinda's hand, showing his gallantry and devotion. He emphasizes that he is honored to have met her and to have helped with the princess's education, which elicits Lucinda's gratitude and trust. Lucinda laughs as she recalls a past meeting with Pietro, which she says was full of surprises. She admits with a smile that the princess's mystical pet creates surprising situations at times. Pietro admits that he needs to exercise more to be ready to catch the flying princess. His sincere desire to be helpful and supportive of Errol brings a smile and approval from everyone. Lucinda hopes that incidents like this will not happen again and agrees with Pietro. Their unity in caring for the princess emphasizes the importance of their mission and their willingness to work together. Pietro reveals that he has purchased several books to educate the princess. His eagerness to ensure that Errol has everything she needs to learn emphasizes his seriousness about his task. Errol happily notes that she seems to have already read quite a few books. Her enthusiasm for the learning process and her desire to learn new things impresses Pietro and Lucinda. Pietro suggests starting with a little game to make learning more interesting. Errol happily agrees, saying that the game will be more interesting than reading books. Their interaction fills the room with joy and enthusiasm. Errol, the princess with golden hair, was playing with blocks with Pietro, the baron's son. Pietro was showing Errol how to connect the blocks, and she was trying to replicate his actions, creating her first structures. Errol notices that the blocks have inscriptions in a language unknown to her. She's surprised and wonders what alphabet is used. Lucinda, her aunt, explains that it is an alphabet similar to Korean. Errol, interested in her new knowledge, decides to try to write something using the new alphabet. Pietro encourages her and suggests that they experiment with writing together. Errol takes a pencil and writes the word chocolate. She confesses to Pietro that she now feels like eating chocolate, even though it was originally just an exercise in writing. Pietro asks Errol if they should study another text. Errol agrees, showing a keen interest in learning. Pietro helps her by giving her new assignments. Errol begins to play Connect the Dots to see what letters or words will result. She immerses herself in the process, enjoying her new activity. Errol proudly shows Pietro her results. Although her letters are not quite neat yet, she is pleased with her progress and asks how he likes her work. Pietro praises Errol for her efforts and says she is good for her age. This inspires Errol to do more, and she begins to create more intricate patterns. Meanwhile, Tessa, Errol's uncle, summons Lucinda and asks her to round everyone up. He notices something unusual in the princess's actions and wants to discuss it with the others. Tessa, concerned about the changes happening to Errol, starts a conversation with Lucinda, expressing his concern. Lucinda, understanding his anxiety, promises to find out what's wrong and help sort out the situation. Errol, the little girl with golden hair, is surprised to realize that Alexander, the guard with blue hair, apparently disapproves of her looks, thinking that she is acting out of past versions of herself. His face expresses a mixture of surprise and bewilderment, creating a tense atmosphere. Further, Errol realizes that Alexander considers her to be one of those whose opinion he cares about. This recognition makes the girl feel honored and proud, but also adds to her confusion about the situation. Suddenly, her uncle Thesa appears, and together with Alexander, they begin to look at each other with suspicion. Errol cannot understand why their relationship has changed so drastically and what has caused this cold atmosphere. Errol sits on the chair, wondering why her uncle needed to be informed of the situation. Her little heart is pounding with excitement, and she can't understand why it had to be said specifically to Tessa. Meanwhile, in another part of the room, Lucinda, Pietro, and Fenrir are discussing the Emperor's interests. Lucinda explains that as Lloyd's daughter, she wants to establish a friendly relationship, much to Pietro's surprise. A strange creature, a familiar named Boo Boo, enters the scene and condemns the Emperor, calling him bloodless and heartless. Errol is shocked by such words, believing it to be an insult to her uncle, and feels a mixture of anger and bewilderment. A servant with black hair informs everyone that the Emperor has come for a visit. This news causes everyone present a mixture of surprise and concern, as the Emperor's arrival always brings important news. Errol asks Pietro in confusion when exactly he had contact with the Emperor. Pietro looks embarrassed and apologizes, not understanding what he did wrong. Fenrir tells him that the Emperor heard about Errol's first language lesson and decided to visit her. Errol feels the tension and excitement of the upcoming meeting, feeling insecure. Boo Boo continues to discuss the Emperor's interest, but Errol exclaims indignantly that this is not true. Her little heart can't take it, and she can't believe that such a thing is possible. Errol, the little girl with golden hair, impresses everyone with her abilities. The man with blue hair is surprised that she already knows how to read, which is not appropriate for her age. Tessa and Pietro discuss how Errol was able to learn so quickly. Pietro thinks she is a genius, since she should only be able to say mama and papa for her age. Tessa speculates that perhaps her abilities are connected to a mystical beast. Pietro confirms that the beast's influence may explain her abilities. Suddenly, Tessa summons the mystical beast to test its influence. Errol, holding her pet in her arms, observes what is happening. The beast, surprised by the appearance, begins to speak. Pietro notes how well it talks. Errol asks Thesa to protect her pet. Pietro explains that the mystical beast and its master can share thoughts, which is what makes the beast speak so well. This surprises everyone present. A blue-haired man tells Thesa an important piece of news. He asks that everyone except Miss Lucinda and the princess be released. Tessa asks the reasons for this decision. Pietro explains that Mrs. Riccardo's son has recently been found and is in protective custody at Raffaello. Tessa is shocked. Mrs. Riccardo's son, thought to be dead, has turned out to be alive. Errol looks on with excitement at what is happening. Pietro confirms that the boy is alive and well. This discovery changes everything and raises many questions for everyone present. Lucinda, sitting on the couch with the baby in her arms, utters an order to kill him, which horrifies the girl. This shocking statement sets a somber tone for further events, and the audience realizes that there is a deep intrigue hidden in the story. Tessa, with a stern expression on his face, questions the reasons for protecting the boy in Raffaello, hinting at a previously known answer. His disbelief and suspicion inflame the situation and create an atmosphere of tension. Alexander calmly explains that protecting the boy is the princess's will, emphasizing his loyalty and willingness to do her every bidding. His loyalty inspires respect, but also raises questions about the princess's motive. Errol, sitting with the child, pensively ponders how Thesa knew about the boy. Meanwhile, her pet is probably trying to justify herself in some unknowable situation. The scene is filled with mystery and unexpected twists and turns. Tessa, sitting on the couch, questions Alexander again about the reason for sharing this information now. Alexander explains that he thought he wouldn't be believed even if he told the truth. This further adds to the distrust and intrigue. Tessa, looking intently at Alexander, asks if he believes him now. Alexander, with a clear strain in his voice, confirms that he does. This is a moment of truth that could change the course of events. Tessa scoffs at the boy, noting how infants forget easily. He wonders about the child's future even if he survives, which adds drama and tension to the story. Alexander, standing in the doorway, announces that he has been ordered to become the princess's sword. His determination and willingness to carry out the order emphasizes his role as a protector and warrior. The princess orders Alexander to rescue a boy named Sick Ricardo, despite the contradictory nature of the orders. Alexander emphasizes that following such orders requires a good reason, which raises further questions and doubts. Tessa, with mock annoyance and irritation, points out that Alexander is like a puppet without a will of his own and can talk a lot. He suspects that Alexander's father's order is getting on his nerves, which adds another facet to the conflict. Al, Errol's guard, feels the urge to follow someone of his own free will. His eyes read determination and confidence. A blue glow shines in his background, emphasizing his serious intent. Tessa, Errol's uncle, can't believe his niece is standing before him. His eyes burn with rage and disbelief, and red sparks glow around him, adding drama to his emotional state. Al warns Tessu that if he tries to kill the child, he will do everything in his power to stop him because it is the princess's wish. Al is determined to protect Errol at all costs. Errol, a little girl with golden hair and big green eyes, asks in confusion why this is happening. Her face expresses a mixture of confusion and sadness. Thesa and Al clash in a tense battle, their powers visible as blue and red glow. Errol remembers that she saved Seek, and this memory adds to her resolve. Errol screams in anger that she hates Tessu. Her face is twisted with rage and her emotions overwhelm her. Tessa is confused, not sure how to react to her words. Al is shocked to see Tessa trembling. He wonders if the one isn't a master of fire who doesn't know how to stop when it flares up. This emphasizes his doubts about Tessa's strength and determination. Al is dumbfounded after realizing that this whole situation only happened because of Errol. His face expresses surprise and concern for the child's future. Errol asks angrily what this feeling is. Her face turns red and her eyes sparkle with determination. She is ready to fight for her future and her safety. Errol screams that she hates Tessu. Her tears stream down her face, reflecting deep resentment and rage. A woman sitting on the couch yells at the two men, stating that she doesn't want to see them. She has a small child in her arms, and the men stand at a distance, looking concerned and startled by her words. One of the men, standing in the darkened room, has deep doubts. He is not sure he can care for a child he considers abnormal and even a monster. He is tormented by the thought that the real heir is another, and it is he who needs to take on this responsibility. Raffaello, a white-haired warlord, smirks as he looks at the boy. He is certain that this child is the prince he has been waiting for. His face expresses smugness and anticipation of great things to come. Alexander stands before the man with a determined expression on his face. The military commander addresses him, asking if he does not hate the emperor and wishes to take revenge on him. The questions sound like a challenge that Alexander is ready to answer. The warlord continues to test Alexander by asking an even more provocative question. Does he not want to become emperor? Alexander is confused, his face expressing confusion and sudden insight. Alexander, distraught, replies that people just want to use him wherever he goes. He declares emphatically that he has no intention of living like a dog and demands that they stop talking nonsense. The warlord laughs as he looks at Alexander and confidently states that the boy probably thinks he's scary since everyone is running away from him screaming. However, he himself doesn't look scared, but rather enjoys the situation. Alexander looks in surprise at the boy with blue hair, who turns out to be his brother. The brother, turning to the warlord, confirms that he understands his words and is ready to support his father. The warlord orders Alexander to show his skills. He says that the mystical beast Alexander can control is very powerful. Interest flashes in his brother's eyes, and Alexander tenses up. Thesa warns him that despite the mystical beast's power, there are opponents who are immune to it. His brother's smile turns grim, and he looks at Alexander with confidence, as if knowing that this test will not be easy. Tessa, trying to calm Errol down, asks her to stop, but the girl begins to scream. She's clearly upset about something and won't listen to anyone but her mom. Errol screams words of hatred at everyone around her except her mother, whom she adores. This makes Tess feel confused and anxious. Lucinda, holding Errol in her arms, tries to calm her down, but the girl continues to scream that she hates everyone. Tessa realizes that all she hears is the word hate and feels helpless in the face of the child's rage. Lucinda does her best to calm the girl down, but her screaming continues. Errol continues to scream that everyone is bad. Tessa tries to explain to Alexander that all the blame lies with the emperor, but Alexander doesn't understand what he means. Tessa loses patience, not knowing how to handle the situation. Lucinda, concerned about Errol's behavior, asks Tessa if there is something wrong with his hearing, as he clearly doesn't understand what is going on around him. Tessa feels completely disoriented at this point. Lucinda tells Tessa and Alexander that they are acting like children. Tessa and Alexander look at each other, unsure of what to do next. Their helplessness in the face of Errol's emotional storm becomes apparent. Lucinda sternly tells them that they are acting like children right in front of this child and that this is unacceptable. Errol, feeling her mother's energy, calms down a bit but still remains tense. Tessa and Alexander stand bewildered in front of Lucinda and Errol. Lucinda accuses them of not understanding how to behave with a child. Errol senses all the tension around her, and it only adds to her anxiety. Lucinda, infuriated, yells at Tessa and Alexander, asking what they are even doing. Errol starts crying, and the situation spirals out of control. Lucinda tries to hold Errol back, but the girl becomes increasingly out of control. Tessa and Alexander are in a panic. Lucinda yells for them to act faster, but the two don't know what to do. Errol continues to scream and cry, and the atmosphere is heating up. Tessa and Alexander realize that a solution is urgently needed. Tessa and Alexander decide to cooperate to calm Errol down. They shake hands, realizing that from now on, they must work together for the good of the girl. Tessa admits that he was careless and is ready to accept punishment for his mistakes. Lucinda, with golden hair, held Errol, a sweet little girl with golden hair, in her arms and tried to comfort her while smiling herself. She realized that the Emperor would bow his head to no one and expressed hope that Alex would not be dismissed. Lucinda informed Alexander that he needed to talk to Errol. She reminded him of the importance of that communication, realizing that it could be pivotal to their relationship. Alexander unexpectedly apologizes to Errol, but she remains wary. His apology sounds sincere, and it comes as a surprise to everyone present. Errol, in Lucinda's arms, looks concerned as Alex begins to approach her. Lucinda warns him to stay away if he wants to stay alive, and this creates tension in the room. Lucinda, not hiding her irritation, reminds him of the importance of the current moment. Errol wonders what exactly is supposed to happen today, and everyone waits to see what Lucinda has to say. Errol is surprised when Lucinda lifts her up and asks Alexander to hug her. Errol looks at him in disbelief, but Lucinda persists. Alexander resolutely refuses, and this leads to a new wave of tension. Lucinda again asks him to participate in this important moment while Errol looks indignant. Lucinda slowly lifts Errol up to Alexander, and when he holds out his hand, she slips a little, but manages to hold on. It's a moment of tension for everyone. Alexander takes Errol in his arms, and in that moment, it's as if everything around them comes to a standstill. Errol feels protected, and this moment is filled with magic and light. Lucinda thanks Alexander for his quick action, expressing great appreciation. She realizes that this moment will change many things in their lives and hopes for a better future for Errol. Tessa, blue hair, is concerned that Lucinda, Errol's aunt, has abandoned him. He holds baby Errol, who looks unhappy and sad. He thinks about how their situation would be much worse without help. Lucinda smiles, radiant with joy. She reflects on how Tessa suddenly took Errol in her arms. Errol is puzzled, not believing that her aunt is in front of her. She asks herself who it really is. Tessa stands with his eyes closed and a determined expression on his face, stating that he never said he couldn't do something. He looks confident in his abilities despite the difficulty. Lucinda, turning to Tessa, expresses doubt. She looks at him with tenderness and hope. Errol looks at them, feeling supported and cared for by his aunt and uncle, even if their relationship isn't perfect. Errol feels warm and safe in Tessa's arms. Lucinda notices how naturally Tessa holds the baby girl and notices that Errol hasn't even cried. She realizes that Tessa is important to the girl. Errol reflects on Tessa, wondering why he is so warm. She thinks it might have something to do with the fact that he is a man of fire and that his temperature is higher than normal. These thoughts give her a sense of security. Errol continues to think about Taz and their relationship. She wonders if she knows everything about him and tries to understand him better. Her naive and curious musings show the depth of her feelings. Lucinda explains to Tease that Errol understands what adults say. She advises him not to force the girl to listen to him just because of her age. These words make a strong impression on Tessa, and he thinks about his approach to parenting. Lucinda goes on to say that Tessa needs to show Errol that he cares deeply. Errol takes these words with surprise and joy. Her eyes open wide, and she feels protected and loved. Tessa questions whether he can really show such care. He looks at Errol, contemplating his actions and how to express his love and attention. This moment becomes a turning point in their relationship. Errol, the little girl with golden hair, watches Tessa, the uncle with blue hair, carefully. He says that his feelings are still the same, but Errol is clearly not happy about it, pressing her lips together in displeasure. Lucinda, the woman with the golden hair, looks at them worriedly, trying to calm the situation. Errol, unable to stand it, shows her resentment by calling Tessu a stubborn brat. Her face is contorted with anger, and she crosses her arms tightly across her chest, showing how much she dislikes the situation. Lucinda, trying to calm the girl down, looks at her with a smile. Tessa promises not to kill anyone at Lucinda's request. Errol, still angry, freezes in thoughtfulness as if pondering his words. The atmosphere in the room is tense, and everyone in the room is trying to deal with their own emotions. Errol is angry as she sits in her chair and doesn't understand why her uncle and aunt are so supportive of Tessu. She vigorously expresses her resentment, questioning their decision. Lucinda tries to calm the girl down, explaining that Tessa is doing this out of concern for her well-being. Lucinda suggests that Errol calm down and trust their highness. Errol, unable to stand it, cries out, accusing her mother of siding with Tessa. Lucinda tries to explain to her that it's all for her own good, but the girl isn't ready to accept such explanations. Errol claims that dads don't play. Lucinda sits next to her and tries to convince her otherwise, showing her that things aren't that simple in life. Errol looks at her aunt skeptically, her face expressing disbelief and incomprehension. Lucinda takes Errol in her arms and reminds her that it's class time. The girl reluctantly agrees, but her thoughts are still preoccupied with the recent conflict. She feels unfairly hurt and does not understand why she is not supported. Pietro, a man with green hair, greets Lucinda and Errol. He expresses admiration for their appearance and tries to lift their spirits. Lucinda answers him with a smile, trying to distract Errol from her sad thoughts. Pietro asks if they are okay, referring to yesterday's incident. He looks concerned and looks at Lucinda carefully, waiting for an answer. Lucinda nods, trying to reassure him that everything is under control, though inside she is still worried. Errol, despite the adult's best efforts, is still angry. She doesn't understand why she isn't being listened to and feels that her opinion is being ignored. Lucinda and Pietro continue to try to calm the girl, assuring her that everything is being done for her good. Errol, the little princess with golden hair, stands next to Pietro, the Baron's son and her teacher. He explains that His Highness is a gentle man, but this causes Errol and Lucinda, her aunt, to be surprised and perplexed. Errol ponders why Pietro and Lucinda have become so friendly. She is outraged that events are not unfolding, as in the original story, and declares that she is against both of them. Lucinda explains that it was because of Errol. Pietro informs Lucinda that Sir Alexander has been sentenced to probation for a month. This enrages Errol, as she feels that what he did was not harsh enough. She wonders why he is being so soft. Pietro admits that he is honored to teach a smart princess like Errol. He smiles and holds a stack of books in his hands, radiating genuine joy and pride in his student. After the lesson is over, Pietro says goodbye to Errol, saying he will see her next week. Errol is tired and collapses in her chair, feeling exhausted after the lesson. Lucinda suggests that they have lunch out of the house since it is very warm outside. She smiles, inviting Errol to spend time outdoors, which seems like a great idea for the little princess. Errol asks if they can go outside even though their older brother Alex is not present. She looks forward to the walk, tilting her head slightly as she waits for an answer. Errol enjoys the nice weather and beautiful scenery lying on the windowsill. She relaxes, feeling the sunlight warming her face, and marvels at the nature around her. Lucinda and Errol walk along the path they used to walk with Alex. Errol remembers past walks when they all enjoyed these moments together and feels slightly nostalgic. In the garden, Errol sees his uncle Tessu sitting at the table eating breakfast. He is surprised to see Errol and calls her by name, expressing his joy at seeing his niece unexpectedly. A golden-haired woman named Lucinda holds a little girl named Errol in her arms. Suddenly, Errol sees Tesu, her uncle, and wonders why he looks so handsome, and Lucinda explains with a gentle smile that Errol, looking at Lucinda with curiosity, asks how old she is, to which Lucinda informs her that His Grace apparently wants to talk to Errol about something important. The little girl asks in amazement if she is a year old. The next day, Lucinda approaches Thesa sitting at a table in the garden with Errol. Tesa anxiously calls out for Lucinda to hold on, and Lucinda greets him, calling him Your Grace. Meanwhile, Errol watches their conversation with confusion. Lucinda reassures Thesa, reminding him that Errol doesn't remember many events from his childhood, and asks him not to take it personally. Tessa, for her part, tries not to make a big deal out of it and agrees with Lucinda. Tessa informs Lucinda that Errol will have to take in a new student, Sika Ricardo, and take care of him. Errol, hearing this, excitedly asks his uncle if this is really the case, to which Tessa replies in the affirmative. Errol, upon hearing that Siku will be sent north, is worried about him and exclaims that he doesn't want that. Tessa explains that he has appointed a trusted guardian for Sika, so she won't worry. Tessa goes on to say that it will be much better than being used like it happened to him. Errol, listening to his uncle with concern, begins to understand the depth of his worries. Tessa apologizes to Errol for his past inability to control his emotions due to also being used in the past. Errol, after realizing this, feels even more closeness and understanding towards her uncle. Errol, a little girl with golden hair, sits in a stroller amongst beautiful flowers. She looks at Tesu, the man with blue hair, and asks if he likes what she sees. Her large green eyes express curiosity and hope. Tessa, looking at Errol, suggests that she try saying what she just heard. He watches her reaction with interest, seeing her struggling to say words that are new to her yet. Errol, looking into Tayce's eyes, begins to realize that he really likes her. Her expression becomes serious and focused as she repeats the phrase to please her uncle. Tez, still a little hesitant, admits that he has never liked anyone before. He tries to understand his feelings and realize what it is that makes Errol so special to him. Errol doesn't understand why all men always say they've never liked anyone before. She begins to wonder about what kind of past everyone has had and why it is so important to them. Suddenly, Errol shrieks with joy that Tessa likes her, calling him Daddy. She is enthusiastic and happy, not realizing what makes this recognition so unexpected for him. Errol, sensing Tessa's support, continues to scream, demanding an answer. She wants her words to be heard and accepted and her joy shared with those around her. Tessa doesn't realize what kind of miracle he sees before him. His thoughts are confused when he hears Errol call him Daddy, and he can't figure out how to react to it. Langrisa, a white fox with tails, is ordered by Thesa to catch and bring Booba, a winged cat. Tesa looks wistfully at her faithful fox, waiting for the task to be completed. Errol, holding on to Booba, yells that it's everyone's fault. She is angry and expresses her hatred for everyone who doesn't understand her feelings. This emotional confession emphasizes her affection and desire to be loved. Errol, a little girl with golden hair, cuddles up to her surname Boo Boo, pondering why he didn't like anyone before if her daddy is sympathetic to him. Boo Boo grumbles back, claiming to really hate her, though that's clearly not true. Tessa asks Boo Boo if he liked Errol's dad. Boo Boo recalls that indeed Brother Lloyd was there. The memory gives him mixed feelings, and he seems a little embarrassed. Errol rebukes Boo Boo for his words about not liking anyone, insisting that he must have a mother, for there is no creature that does not love its mother. She shows how important family and caring is to her. Tessa recalls that Boo Boo also said that they had to leave the place first, because everyone around him was becoming miserable. He, the smart one, instinctively wanted to escape, realizing that his presence could bring harm to others. Tessa, clearly in emotional distress, offers Errol the title of Grand Duchess and asks her to stay away from him. He thinks it's best for everyone, though deep down he realizes it will hurt her. Errol resents it, realizing that Tessa is trying to push her away right now, despite her efforts to be helpful. She feels rejected and can't understand why her efforts go unnoticed. Errol, sitting next to Tessa in the garden, confidently declares that Daddy likes her. Tessa looks surprised and somewhat confused, not knowing how to properly respond to her sincere words. Errol continues to explain that she likes being who she is and that she deserves to be around those she cares about. Her determination and willpower impresses Tisu, causing him to reflect on his actions. Boo-Boo, not understanding the whole point, questions why Errol thinks people will get hurt if she isn't around. Tessa, meanwhile, looks at her thoughtfully, trying to figure out the right thing to do in this situation. Errol insistently asks Tessa to promise her not to push her away anymore, explaining that it hurts her. In an emotional outburst, she yells, "Pink, why?" and asks him to promise that they will always be together. Tessa, standing back, communicates with Langrisa. Langrisa reminds him to promise not to give up, even if he has to give his all. It is an emotional moment that emphasizes the importance of resilience and staying true to promises. Errol, the little girl with golden hair, reaches out to her Uncle Tease and asks him to live together. She wants him to promise her that. Her sincere feelings and trust make this moment very touching. Tessa, holding Errol's hand, promises her that he will always be there for her. This moment, full of warmth and love, symbolizes the strong family bond between them. Errol, now a 6-year-old girl, angrily screams Langrisa's name. Her emotions convey all the intensity and passion she puts into her words, showing how important everything that is happening is to her. Langrisa, a free animal, lounges on the couch while Errol resents his nightly walks. Langrisa, however, doesn't see this as a problem, which makes the girl even more resentful. Errol explains that Mr. Poo-Poo, a demon-like creature, should be more careful. Her seriousness and concern for safety reflects her caring nature, despite Mr. Poo-Poo's appearance. Mr. Poo-Poo, a mythical beast, frightens Errol with his majestic appearance. But the girl only relishes holding him in her arms and emphasizes that his fur has become less fluffy over the past 5 years. The two maids discuss that Princess Errol is in the room with Mr. Poo-Poo. This moment emphasizes the servant's attention to Errol and her surroundings, creating a sense of care and order in the house. Errol hugs Mr. Poo-Poo and assures him that he is beautiful too. This moment shows their friendship and mutual affection despite their differences in appearance. Errol, glowing with happiness, sits next to Mr. Poo-Poo, expressing his love and appreciation. This moment concludes the entire story, emphasizing that true beauty and kindness always win out. Errol notices that her familiar Boo-Boo seems anxious and senses something. His blue eye is intense, as if he is anticipating an upcoming event. Errol holds Boo-Boo in her lap and reads the anxiety in her eyes. She tries to figure out what's going on and quietly asks her familiar what's bothering him. Errol tries to remember what would cause her familiar to be so worried. Her thoughts are racing, and she begins to guess that it might have something to do with her Uncle Tessa. Errol, standing on the steps, remembers that her Uncle Tessa was always willing to do anything for her niece. She thinks about how much he loves and supports her. Errol suddenly realizes that it's not her birthday and asks her Uncle Tessa what he's up to this time. Tessa, holding her in her arms, looks mysterious and intrigued. Tessa, looking at Errol, tells her that today is 100 days before her birthday. Errol is stunned and exclaims that her uncle is even counting down the days until her birthday. The chef congratulates Errol on 50 days until her birthday and informs her that from this day forward, the entire bakery will be open only for the princess. Errol is perplexed as to what is going on. Tessa continues to surprise Errol by saying that 10 days before her birthday, he will give her a toy store. Errol asks him to stop as it is too much. Errol runs up the stairs yelling to Uncle Tessa what he is cooking this time. She remembers that her uncle loves to throw events and always comes up with something special. Errol meets Alexander, her security guard, who tells her that she has some time for a break. He reminds her that they all care about her and support her in everything. Princess Errol with golden hair was rushing to the Emperor's palace, but she was stopped by her guard Alexander, surprised that she had not been notified of today's audience. He was confused, as he was unaware of the day's plans. Errol explained that she had heard rumors of her uncle's strange preparations and wanted to look into it. Alexander was not privy to the details, but decided to support her in her investigation, realizing the importance of the situation. The princess persistently questioned Alexander if he knew anything that might shed light on what was going on. He assured her that he knew nothing, but was willing to help find out the truth. Errol insisted that they go to her uncle's house immediately. On the way, she revealed that her uncle was planning a party, but her intuition told her that there was something behind it. Alexander doubted that Uncle could be up to something dangerous. Errol expressed concern that her uncle might jeopardize the country if he continued his actions. Alexander tried to reassure her, assuring her that nothing terrible would happen in the current situation. Errol and Alexander walked quickly up the stairs of the palace, determined to stop the princess's uncle from possible rash actions. Alexander was ready to support Errol in her quest to protect the country. They were met in the hall by soldiers who greeted the princess warmly. Errol felt confident knowing that she was supported by loyal men ready to help in her mission. One of the soldiers asked if the princess liked chocolate, wanting to give her a treat. This relaxed Errol a bit, but her thoughts were still focused on meeting her uncle and finding out his plans. Another soldier offered the princess cake, but she was determined to meet her uncle. She noted with slight irony that such a dessert trap would not distract her from her goal. Errol firmly stated that she was here to meet her uncle, and no amount of sweets would stop her. The soldiers laughed, recognizing her determination, and Errol and Alexander headed onward, ready for any surprises that might await them ahead. Errol approached the palace guards. They offered her a taste of sweets in a friendly manner, which displeased her. She mentally called them insolent people who use food to get their way. Errol was surprised to see General Raffaello, who greeted her, noting that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. His appearance was a surprise to everyone. Raffaello decided to treat Errol to tea, enjoying her company. She was surprised at how happy he was to meet her, and even began to think that the old general was really lucky to meet such an important person. Errol began to think about Raffaello's past, remembering his glorious military exploits. She was impressed that he had personally commanded the Caribbean Sea battle, though she noticed that he had become more vulnerable over time. Looking at Raffaello, Errol wondered if his declining health was related to his recent illnesses. She felt concern for him and wondered what exactly had caused his ailments. Raffaello, a little confused by Errol's questions, tried to understand what she meant. He was puzzled by her attention to his health, but tried not to show it. Errol, who was watching Raffaello closely, noted that it was important to eat healthy herbs and vegetables for a healthy liver. Her thoughtfulness drew respect from those around him. Before leaving, Errol warned Raffaello to take care of his liver. She added that this was not a joke and her words should be taken seriously. Raffaello replied that he understood her concern. Alexander, Errol's blue guard, mockingly noted that being an old general was different. Raffaello heard his words and expressed his displeasure, not understanding exactly what was meant. Tessa, Errol's uncle, sternly reminded her that she had violated etiquette by not contacting him when she arrived. Errol felt guilty, realizing her mistake, and silently accepted the rebuke. Tessa, Errol's uncle, was sitting at his desk when Errol came to him unexpectedly. She wanted to talk, but Tessa was very busy because of the announcement of the end of the war and couldn't take the time to remind her of the importance of his position. Tessa suggested that Errol take something and play somewhere else since he didn't have time to talk to her. He was completely immersed in his business, and he wanted Errol to understand that. Errol was surprised to learn that she couldn't just come to the emperor of a nation, even if he was her uncle. She was struck by the realization of the importance of his role and the seriousness of his responsibilities. Tessa explained that the document had to be returned, but Errol questioned how she could do that, showing him the papers. She was determined to understand exactly what was required of her. Tessa was trying to figure out exactly who the document needed to be returned to, and Errol was confused at the mention of General Ruff. Her confusion confused him even more, adding tension to their conversation. Errol tried to convince Thisu that returning the document would be pointless since so many people had worked hard to get it. Her argument seemed valid and convincing. Tessa told Errol that she was past the age where she could have a duchy in her name, which surprised her greatly. She hadn't expected to hear such words and was stunned by the news. Tessa explained that even in his name, there were 14 territories he owned. He couldn't leave everything in Amelia's name and wanted Errol to understand the importance of sharing responsibility. 9. Errol reflected that this was commonplace in the world of romantic fantasy. She tried to make sense of what she had heard and figure out if she should just take it for granted and get over it. Tessa asked if there was anything else that Errol wanted to say. She replied that there was nothing else, and with those words, she left the office, pondering all the news she had heard. Errol suspects something dubious and tensely listens. Her anxiety grows when she hears strange noises outside the door, which heightens her suspicions. The gathered officers in the room are perplexed as to why they are here. Errol, holding some paper, walks over to Alexander, asking what they were talking about. Alexander asks Errol about the document. She replies that her uncle told her to lengthen her name. This seems strange to her, but she shows the paper. Alexander laughs at how believable the lie sounds. He says that her uncle asked her to take the document, which leaves Errol even more perplexed. The officers begin to discuss the name Amelia Alkesis Illuminas, arguing that it suits the princess. Alexander supports this, assuring her that the name is very beautiful. One of the officers explains that Alkesis is an area of the Crystal Mountains that the princess noted as beautiful. Errol remembers it. The officer continues to describe the place, talking about the beautiful sandy beach. Errol asks interestedly if there really is a sandy beach there. Errol marvels at the beauty of the beach and asks where the grand location is. The officers assure her that the beach is indeed beautiful. Baron Pietro gives Errol a book for completing her introduction to literature. She is surprised and grateful for such a gift, promising to cherish it. Errol thanks the Baron and immerses herself in memories of the time when she first learned about these places. She decides to keep the book as a symbol of important memories. Errol was thrilled with what happened. Even if she said it was beautiful, she wouldn't be believed. Her smile was the answer to the question of whether it was really fine. Alexander and Lucinda laughed, agreeing that everything had gone perfectly. When Errol heard the news, she couldn't believe her ears. Was it really true? She asked Alexander if she could have been mistaken, to which he embarrassedly replied that he didn't know what she was talking about. Tessa sat at the table, calmly signing the document. His words that all was said shocked everyone. His confidence and composure always amazed those around him. One of the guards informed him that the princess's seal was already on the document and they couldn't put it back. This gave Errol mixed feelings as she realized that not everything was going according to plan. Errol threw herself on the bed in a rage, screaming that she hated everyone. Her frustration was obvious as she couldn't understand why things weren't going the way she expected. Waving her arms around, Errol explained that they had set the seal themselves, and it was her seal, and she should have it. She resented that she had trusted them, and they had let her down. Lucinda entered the room with a tray of food, offering Errol something to eat. Errol happily responded, calling Lucinda auntie, and her mood improved slightly. Errol shouted that Tessa was a worthless dictator, and Lucinda asked in surprise how she knew such words. This brought smiles to everyone's faces despite the tension of the situation. Errol sat with Lucinda, who brushed her hair. She complained that it was too much and what people would think if they saw them together. Lucinda reassured her, saying that everyone would think they had a good relationship. Errol, with childlike stubbornness, continued to grumble that it was awful to give so much power to an ordinary child. She reminded everyone that she wasn't even Tessa's daughter, and her resentment was understandable. Errol, a little girl with golden hair, stares in amazement at her hair being corrected by Lucinda, her aunt. Errol looks confused, and Lucinda asks if she likes her new hairstyle. Tessa, Errol's uncle, appears and asks if she wants a baby brother or sister, which makes Errol even more surprised. Errol, encouraged by the offer, excitedly declares that she wants a little brother or sister. Lucinda looks at her with a gentle smile. Errol explains that she wants to see her uncle have a baby and live happily ever after. Tessa is puzzled by her words, but tries to understand her wish. Tessa is confused and interjects, not understanding what Errol means. Errol continues to express her desire to see the joy in his eyes. Tessa continues to ask questions, trying to figure out what Errol is talking about. She, meanwhile, is sure of her desire and insists on her own. Tessa begins to realize how different her words are from the original story, which makes him surprised and mildly annoyed. Errol declares emphatically that she has thought long and hard and has come to the conclusion that a child cannot be raised with so much care. She emphasizes that she needs a companion to share all the care with. Errol believes this would solve a lot of problems. Errol loudly and emotionally declares that she wants a little brother or sister, and her determination brings smiles to those in attendance. Errol, a little princess with golden hair, asks Tessa, her uncle, about who he is going to marry. Tessa, the man with blue hair, is surprised by her question and doesn't know what to answer. Errol insists on an answer, voicing her thoughts out loud. She wants to know who he will choose as his bride. Tessa is confused and unsure if he can find a suitable candidate. The princess begins to describe how she sees the ideal partner for her uncle. It would be nice if the bride were beautiful, but that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is that she be kind and gracious. Errol continues, adding that other qualities are also important, such as graciousness, kindness, and a willingness to help others. She wants her uncle's fiancée to be as generous as himself. Tessa, still surprised, explains that he can't identify such qualities in a person with just a glance. He's not sure how to find a girl who meets all these criteria. Errol wonders how to look for a suitable bride for her uncle. She realizes that it may be a daunting task, but still hopes that she will be able to find the right person. Tessa, seeing her determination, offers to organize a special meeting to get to know the potential candidates. He realizes that it might help determine who would be the best fit. Errol agrees to the idea and begins planning how to hold such meetings. She is enthusiastic and hopes that she will find a worthy bride for her uncle. Tessa decides to entrust this important choice to Errol. He believes that her kindness and wisdom will help him find the woman who will be the perfect life partner for him. Errol accepts this responsibility and promises to carefully select the candidates. She is sure that she will be able to find the one who will bring happiness to her dear uncle. Errol, the little princess with golden hair, realizes that the truth she has been told makes her feel uncomfortable. She allows her interlocutor to leave if he has nothing to add. Errol stands in front of a group of young men in military uniforms. They are nervous, and the princess must choose one of them to be empress. Lucinda reminds her that many will try to look perfect in front of her. Errol admits in despair that she doesn't know who to choose. She feels that this is the end for her and cries. This further stresses the young men, who don't know what to do either. Suddenly, Alexander, her guard with blue hair, appears. He convinces Errol that this is not the end for her. The princess is surprised by his presence and questions what he is doing here. Alexander smiles and explains to Errol that this is actually a convenient situation. He emphasizes that officials can't just suggest candidates out of fear of His Majesty. Errol realizes that she is the first one who has decided to do something like this. Alexander confirms her hunch, explaining that if the candidate is from the princess, there will be less hassle. They both agree that the perfect opportunity has arisen to set His Majesty up with someone. Errol happily decides it's time to look for someone suitable. Lucinda and Alexander give Errol a pep talk. Lucinda promises to help her, and Alexander smiles, assuring the princess of her strength. Errol responds with thanks that she will be strong. The soldier watching them is amazed at their passion. He cannot believe how seriously they are taking this task. Errol continues to search for a candidate, willing to do anything to make the right choice. Errol, full of determination, begins to scrutinize each candidate. She realizes that her choice will make a big difference, so she tries to understand the true nature of each applicant. Errol, the princess with golden hair, saw the Empress's questionnaire in front of her and was surprised to ask what it was. She didn't understand why this document was needed or why it was on her desk. Lucinda, the golden-haired woman and Errol's aunt, explained that it was a questionnaire and the data would have to be collected first. Errol was a little confused, but decided to clarify what collect data meant. Lucinda patiently explained that they couldn't interview everyone, so they needed to first select suitable candidates in the first stage. Errol realized that this was an important part of the selection process. Errol, trying to help, began to write down the items that would need to be filled out on the application form. She tried to think of all the important questions and details so as not to miss anything important. Suddenly, Errol realized that she had forgotten the most important thing and jumped up from her seat. She realized that she had missed an important detail and hurried to correct it. Suddenly, a servant came up to them and informed them that His Highness, Errol's uncle named Thesa, was to hold a meeting. Errol quickly made her way to Thesa to find out the details. When she met Tessa, she couldn't resist asking what his ideal of a girl was. She was interested in her uncle's opinion and was determined to find out the answer. Tessa was surprised by the question, but Errol continued to insist, asking what he wanted his date to be like. She was determined and waited for an answer. Tessa hesitated and said that he didn't have an ideal. Errol was disappointed with that answer, as she had expected to hear something specific. Her disappointment was palpable. Lucinda, watching the conversation, asked what it was that attracted Tessu to people. The question made Tessu think even harder, and it made Errol realize that perhaps a person's ideal isn't as important as their true qualities and relationship. Errol shares her preferences with Uncle Thesa, telling him that she likes dark hair, tall stature, and confidence. This conversation gives her a slight embarrassment as she is not yet fully aware of her feelings. After a long day, Tessa reflects on how manipulative Lucinda can be, admiring her ability to handle different situations. He feels like this day has been particularly stressful. Errol continues her conversation with her uncle, confessing that the thought of parenthood scares her. She likes cute girls but finds them a bit of a hassle, which makes her wonder about her preferences. Tessa marvels that Errol asks such bold questions about preferences, and even though he always knew she was smart, her questions still surprise him. He has to admit that she is far from an ordinary girl. A servant interrupts his musings by announcing Baroness Jane's visit. Tessa is alert, preparing for the meeting, as such visits always carry a certain importance and require attention. Lucinda appears with a serious expression on her face and informs her that Errol is determined. Her words emphasize the importance of the upcoming applications, making Tessa feel a growing sense of tension. When Lucinda explains that the applications will go through a rigorous filtering process, Tessa realizes that there will be a lot of work ahead. He'll be facing an interview, which makes it even more difficult. Lucinda suggests how Errol came up with the idea, but Tessa, making excuses, denies his involvement in the idea. He insists that it wasn't his doing, which calms him down a bit. Tessa admits that he is always uncomfortable in front of Errol. Her presence and questions evoke mixed feelings in him, though he admires her persistence and intelligence. Errol, feeling not fully understood, asks Tessa to tell him more about what he finds attractive. Her eyes glow with interest and anticipation, prompting Tessa to talk more frankly. Tessa, a man with blue hair, looks thoughtful and wonders if he should continue to pee from where they left off. He stares at the table in concentration, showing the importance of his work. Tessa watches his interlocutor carefully, his green eyes expressing interest and thoughtfulness. Errol, a small girl with golden hair, asks a question that shows her respect and hesitation. After a brief thought, Thesa suggests that they continue the conversation when the work is finished. Errol agrees, expressing understanding and a willingness to take her time. The two women, dressed in beautiful dresses, are discussing what is happening. They seem a little tense, perhaps because of the importance of the current moment. Their faces express a mixture of anticipation and slight concern. The woman with flowers in her hair sighs, clearly feeling the tension. She tries to remain calm, but you can see that her thoughts are preoccupied with the upcoming events. Errol, the little girl, resents the fact that all the candidates' portraits look the same. She is angry with the artist, which causes her to burst with emotion and resentment. A tired Errol lies down on her desk among the stacks of paper, in need of coffee and rest. She reflects on how hard it is to be the one doing the interviews and feels exhausted and frustrated. Little Princess Errol, tired from her classes, calls her familiar Boo Boo, asking him to show up for just a little while. Boo Boo resents being summoned for no good reason and refuses to submit to her whims. The princess suspects that Boo Boo has eaten her chocolate again and demands an explanation. Boo Boo, trying to defend himself, claims that the great mystical beast would not do such things. Errol exclaims that chocolate is deadly to cats and that Boo Boo will probably kill himself if he continues. She is worried and accuses him of being reckless. Boo Boo replies that he is not. The princess asks Boo Boo to help her choose one of 89 candidates for her uncle. She hopes that he can make the right decision to make her uncle happy. Boo Boo expresses his displeasure at being forced to choose at random. He thinks it is pointless and asks why not let Errol choose for herself. Errol is angry at Boo Boo for being rude and not taking the choice seriously. She explains that her uncle's happiness depends on this choice and cannot leave it to chance. Boo Boo questions whether the emperor should not choose his own happiness and questions Errol's method. She is surprised to realize that Boo Boo is right. Errol begins to contemplate that happiness that does not agree with her uncle's opinion is meaningless. She realizes that her method of choice was wrong and that Boo Boo said the right things. Errol is amazed that a cat she thought was stealing chocolate could say such clever things. She admits her mistake and goes into a reckoning about her approach. Errol realizes that she made a small mistake but feels like a complete failure. She leaves the room feeling depressed about her failed decision.